Chapter 859. Many people couldn't be like the Princess Consort who said, "I'll take care of it." However, the Princess Consort was free and easy to the extreme. The palace servants outside the south study room looked at the two people sitting together. One was holding the other from behind, holding a brush in their hands. Their side faces looked particularly beautiful under the sunlight. In the end, Helian Wei could not sit still. She lazily used her left hand to support her chin, writing very carelessly. Baligaju knocked on her head with his finger. "Your handwriting is like a dog lying on its stomach. How did you read the Buddhist scriptures in the first place? Do the people of Buddhism write like this? Have you seen me reading scriptures?" Helian Vivian snorted and said, "When I was sleeping, I felt the sun was too bright, so I took a book to cover my face. You definitely haven't seen me in Buddhism." Baligaju didn't say anything. He just smiled and squeezed her hand again. In fact, how could he not have seen it? In the whole of Buddhism, only she dared to do that. Every time he went there, she would hold a scripture book there to block him. She probably thought that no one would notice in that position. That was why the prideful phoenix was just a little thing that was lazy to interact with others. It was from then on that he had been thinking that such a little thing shouldn't be left in Buddhism. It should be raised in a place where he could see her all the time. It would be perfect for him to feed her. In fact, it was exactly as he thought. The phoenix in his arms was most suitable for him to raise. Baligaju laughed in a low voice. Helian Vivian didn't know what he was laughing at. She frowned in confusion. Baligaju grabbed her and hugged her again. He ordered, "Continue writing. Didn't you always say that you want to cultivate good prenatal education? How can my child's handwriting be as ugly as yours?" "Hey, if you're talking about prenatal education, then prenatal education. You don't have to attack me personally all the time," Helian Vivian protested amusedly. Baligaju gently curved thin lips. "I am using a typical example to educate them. Let people remember how ugly your handwriting is, and they will know how to work hard after they are born." Helian Vivian. What he said made so much sense that she was actually speechless. Helian Vivian also knew that His Highness was taking pleasure in teasing her, so she didn't care at all. She turned her head, sat up straight, and continued to write. As she wrote, she directed Baligaju to feed her. The days in the South study were like this almost every day. Baligaju still liked to control power. But now, when he was dealing with the booklets, he would hold the booklets in one hand and feed Helian Vivian with the other. Otherwise, he would hold her hand and make her do exercises. In that case, it would be easier to give birth. Soon, it was the 3rd month, and everywhere in the imperial palace was beginning to feel spring. On this day, Helian Vivian was sitting beside Baligaju, studying her new martial arts. She was thinking about how to combine gunpowder and cold weapons when her stomach suddenly hurt. Dozens of heavenly thunders rolled through the clouds. In addition to the blazing fire, there was also a faint Buddhist light that seeped out. This scene, which should have appeared in Mountain Tenya, was now shining in the human world. Every commoner in the capital walked out of their houses and looked up at the sky that was destined to be unstable. Inside and outside the imperial palace, there was an unprecedented panic. Basins of hot water were continuously brought in by palace maids, and all the imperial physicians stood outside the bedroom, anxiously walking back and forth. Even the master of the hidden spirit temple was brought into the capital. The Buddhist light in the room shone brightly. When the midwife saw this scene, she couldn't help but chant Amit Ba. To be honest, they were already stunned, but the 3rd prince was sitting by the bed, and that kind of murderous aura made them dare not waste any time. They just thought that the princess's pregnancy was really unusual. There was so much Buddhist light that they had never seen in a temple. The midwives suppressed the shock in their hearts, and their fingers trembled as they prepared cotton cloth and scissors, which would be useful in a while. When they were almost ready, the palace maid urged in a low voice, "Your Highness, it's time to go out." Baligaju turned his head, and only gave her one word, "Get out." That voice was very cold, without a trace of warmth. The palace maid was so scared that she didn't dare to speak again. The midwives didn't know how to persuade the 3rd prince. Normally, when the princess in the imperial palace was about to give birth, the 3rd prince would not stay, for fear that the dirty blood would ruin the dignity of the imperial family. But it was obvious that no one could make the third prince leave at this time. The midwives braced themselves to do it. But at this time, Hellion Vivian opened her mouth. Her eyes looked at Beligaju, and there was a smile in her weak voice. Go out and wait, okay? I don't want you to see me in such a sorry state. Bailey Jiaju took a deep look at her. Then, he reached out and brushed away the black hair that was sticking to her face. He kissed her gently on the lips. It was just a touch, but it was enough to show how much restraint he had. Okay. In the end, he still followed her wishes. But his orders were always so cold-blooded that it made people tremble. Take good care of the princess. If anything happens to her, this prince will have all of you buried with her. The midwives trembled as they bowed their heads and said yes. They were even more careful when they treated Hellion Vivian. Hellion Vivian didn't feel any discomfort. She bit a piece of white cloth in her mouth, and the clothes she wore were loose. Someone cut her dress, and there was a sound everywhere. Princess Consort, use more strength. Yes, that's it. The voices of the midwives rang out one after another in her ears. Hellion Vivian adjusted her breathing and strength, according to the medical knowledge she had learned in the modern world. Her fingers gripped the bedsheet, and each time, she used more strength than the last. Finally, she heard the midwives say, "The head is coming out, the head is coming out. The body is coming out soon." Hearing this, Hellion Vivian bit her thin lips and used more strength. Soft black feathers fell one by one, and in the fog, a baby with scarlet eyes fell to the ground. But at that time he didn't open his eyes. Just by looking at that pink little face, everyone would think that he was a little angel sent by the heavens. Princess, it's a prince, a little prince. The joy in the midwives' voices seemed to be contagious. When Hellion Vivian turned her head, she also laughed softly. The baby was very obedient. He was sucking on his thumb in his mouth, unlike other babies who cried when they were born. Instead, he was laughing in an unbridled manner. It was as if he was mocking the gods and Buddhas. Chapter 860. Because of the birth of the prince, the palace was filled with jubilation. The midwife was laughing inside, and the palace maids who heard the report outside laughed even more. However, no one knew that Hellion Vivian's soul seemed to be guided by something, and was being forcefully stripped away. Even she did not realize it. Hellion Vivian only felt her eyes tighten, and she was in a daze. When she opened her eyes again, she saw a doctor in a white coat with a mask on his face. Hellion Weiwei's mind was in a mess. She shook her head, and her line of sight moved downwards. Someone was holding a scalpel, and there was a pulsator that kept beating. Everything was very familiar. It was so familiar that Hellion Vivian subconsciously wanted to stand up. This was not the palace, nor was it the War Dragon dynasty. This was the 21st century. How could this be? Why was she here? Hellion Vivian's eyes were in a mess, but her arm was pressed down, and then there was a hurried voice. The patient is out of the coma. Her pulse and heartbeat are normal, but her emotions are fluctuating. Do we need to use a tranquilizer? No, it's not good for the child. Wait a minute. The patient seems to have quietened down. Hellion Vivian had indeed quietened down. When she heard that it was not good for the child, she retracted her left hand that was about to knock the doctor out. Although her body was very weak, her movements were very fast. Lying on the operating table, Hellion Vivian looked at the faintly discernible light in her eyes. She did not have time to think about why she had returned to the modern world. The thought of giving birth to the baby safely occupied her mind. She did not understand why a baby would follow her to the modern world. There was no way to explain it with common sense. Originally, in Buddhism, she had seen the death of the phoenix in the hellfire light of Buddha. However, what she did not know was that the death meant that she would return to the modern world. In other words, once the baby was born, her relationship with that world would be cut off. She was supposed to die, just like what the little king of hell said. What Bodhi did was enough to break this destiny. Was that why she brought another baby back to the modern world? But what about Beligaju? Hellion Vivian didn't dare to think about it for a while. She was afraid that if she thought about it, the man would notice something. It was not that there was no way to immortality. As long as she returned to Buddhism, and became the phoenix again, she would be able to continue living. However, if that was really the case, not only would she fulfill the Venerable One's destiny, she would also have to give up on the 2 babies. How could she bear to? She couldn't bear to part with anyone. But at this point her heart still ached. Her heart ached for whether that person would take good care of herself. She was worried that he would go crazy when he realized that she was gone. At this moment, Hellion Vivian was actually not thinking about how many people the other party would kill, or how many things would be destroyed. Instead, it was how to make that man feel a little better. She had promised many people many things, and she always kept her word. It was only to him that she had once said that no matter what happened, she would always be by his side and accompany him. But she still broke her promise. Hellion Vivian reached out to cover her red eyes. She was strong and didn't cry to the point of breaking down, because the only thing she could do now was to let the babies be born safely. With Hellion Vivian's cooperation, the rest of the work went smoothly. Wah! A clear cry resounded throughout the entire hospital. The child was born with auspicious light. Even in modern times, such auspicious light could no longer be seen by the naked eye. However, as soon as he was born, the Qi in the hospital morgue was reduced by more than half. This was a situation that had never happened before. It was not noticed by ordinary people, but none of the dead souls within hundreds of miles dared to approach the operating room. Even the reapers who came to the hospital to catch the dead souls to Hades also stopped in that instant. They couldn't help but look at the end of the corridor. What's that? Why is the spirit in the body so strong? Shall we go and take a look? The 2 reapers looked at each other and planned to walk in that direction. However, before they could move, their path was blocked by their leader. The leader carried a scythe on his shoulder and wore a well-ironed suit. His slender fingers pushed up the frame of his glasses as he said in a calm voice, "Hades only cares about the dead, not the living. Go back." Yes. The reapers didn't dare to say anything. However, when they returned to Hades, there were still people who asked, "Hey, what happened up there?" The ghosts on our side reacted. Mengpa didn't even drink the soup, and just stared blankly at the top of their heads. What was born? Why can we feel the light of Buddha, even in the 18th level of hell? You're asking me, how would I know? The reaper said in a low voice. In short, it's an incredible fellow. The same situation was happening in the palace. However, compared to the tranquility of modern times, this place seemed to be more destructive. From the moment the child smiled, a long Sanskrit chant seemed to resound in the air. 3,000 feet under the yellow springs, countless demons seemed to have been summoned, and waves of water splashed out. The fiendish demons hidden in the clouds revealed their heads excitedly, as if they were celebrating the birth of their little master. However, the celebration in the dark was always different from the celebration in the human world. The demons were about to arrive, and all of them followed behind Beligaju, as if they were cheering for this day. A thick black fog engulfed the entire palace. Beligaju didn't hesitate at all. When he heard that the mother and child were safe, he strode into the bedroom. His eyes were fixed on the person lying on the bed, and he didn't even look at the little prince that the midwife carried over. Without looking, Beligaju knew that it was 100% a demon. He was too familiar with the atmosphere here. So familiar that even if he closed his eyes, he could still smell the thick scent of blood. After his hand touched Hellion Vivian's cheek, he pursed his thin lips and gradually let go. Fortunately, her body was warm. However, when Beligaju leaned over to kiss her lips, his smile suddenly froze on his face. This is, in front of his eyes. Hellion Vivian's face was still very beautiful, and even the signs of her body didn't show any signs of deterioration. But her shell was empty. Bailey Jiaju's expression was distorted in an instant. Following that, it was uncontrollable panic and killing intent that no one could control. How could this be? Beligaju didn't believe it, and used the demon contract to search for Hellion Vivian again. He still couldn't sense it. He couldn't sense anything. She wasn't here. Beligaju's eyes fiercely narrowed for a moment. A loud bang was heard. The bed under his hand was almost instantly shattered into pieces. Before the midwives could recover, Beligaju grabbed the child's arm, and his eyes were cold, as if he was looking for something on the child's body. However, there was still nothing. Chapter 861. Baligaju clenched his hands. No one noticed that in many corners of the imperial palace, because of this action, black fog faintly appeared. The black fog seemed to be extremely scared, trying its best to shrink into a ball. They had never seen a man so angry before. They pressed down on the pain in their chests, not daring to make a sound. They could only look at Baligaju, fearing from the bottom of their hearts what he would do. As Baligaju's mounts, the Fire Qilin and the Azure Dragon naturally felt an unprecedented sense of destruction. They couldn't help but reveal their true forms, soaring above the imperial palace. The Fire Qilin only glanced into the room, vaguely guessing what had happened. Its expression suddenly changed. It had once thought that if its little master was born, then Hellion Vivian's connection with this world would most likely be broken. But thinking was one thing. When this matter truly happened, the Fire Qilin realized that it was actually so uneasy. In the black fog, Baligaju just stood there, no matter how the people around him screamed. It was as if he didn't hear them at all. His fingers were bleeding from his pinch. He had never tortured himself like this before. The midwives didn't know what had happened, but they felt fear from the bottom of their hearts. Finally Baligaju moved. He reached out his blood-stained hand, covering his face. A suppressed and twisted low laugh sounded from his throat. This king said before, "No one can take her away from this king." That kind of laughter was too hoarse, as his voice fell to the ground. The marble under his feet cracked, creating cracks one after another. A power that no one could resist was emitted from his body. The entire imperial palace collapsed under that kind of tremor. The midwives were so scared that their faces turned pale. In the midst of the dust, Bailey Jiaju, who was dressed in a pure black robe, strolled out from inside. He held Hellion Weiwei's body in his arms. His eyes were not at all like what they had seen before. Instead, they were filled with the color of blood, like a red gem, dripping with blood, incomparably beautiful. Large clumps of black feathers fell from the sky. While everyone was in shock, all they could see was the black shadow of the demon behind the man. Those black shadows seemed to have been influenced by their master. With a ruthlessness that seemed to be able to tear everything apart, they swept through the entire palace. He had never seen or felt such a crazy surge of power before. No one dared to act rashly. At this time, Baligaju had clearly lost his mind. No, especially when he had lost his mind. Or rather, he was more like himself than ever. Because without Hellion Weiwei, he no longer needed to think about the only thing that concerned him, as a human being. Many people said that Baligaju was very ruthless. In fact, it was because of Hellion Vivian that he had the patience to do something to hide the evil bloodthirsty aura on his body. Now that Hellion Vivian was no longer around, he couldn't be bothered to pretend anymore. As for how terrifying a Baligaju without disguise was, everyone who had experienced the great battle between the gods and Buddhists knew. For a moment, everyone was in a panic. The master of the Hidden Spirit Temple stood in the middle of the river of blood. He only chanted Umitba. He knew clearly in his heart that if no one stopped Bailey Jiaju, he could destroy the entire capital. "Your Highness," Eunuch's son said worriedly. Apart from fear, there was also sadness on his old face. "You will hurt the little Highness like this." Baligaju didn't stop. When he lowered his head, he found that the little ghost was still hugging his leg. He directly kicked him away, and continued to walk forward. When Eunuch's son saw this, he was almost scared out of his wits. How could a newborn baby take such a kick? He hurriedly wanted to walk over, but found that not only was the little Highness fine, but he was also hugging the royal family's leg after being kicked away for a while. Eunuch's son was stunned. He had never seen a child so resistant to beatings. On the other hand, he was so shocked by the aura that he couldn't stand up at all. Baligaju didn't care about the little burden at his feet. There was only one thought in his mind now, and that was to go to the Hades. Once a person's soul disappeared, it could only be with the King of Hell. Suppressing the anger that was about to explode, Baligaju punched his foot. The earth shook even more. In the most stable palace, the hottest volcano had appeared. The demon tide rose, and countless black crows flew up. The ancient beasts galloped over, almost breaking the ground. Such a huge anomaly appeared in the originally prosperous capital. This made the exorcists feel the most uneasy. Within the 6 paths, all the gods and Buddhas knew that the mountain was not an ordinary mountain, but Mount Bujo in hell. Green Dragon and Fire Qilin looked at each other. Without hesitation, they flew over in an instant and followed behind the man. Every one of them had a premonition in their hearts. This time, their king had really returned. Not only was it because of his strength, but also because of his inhuman nature. Except for Hellion Vivian, everyone else was probably meaningless in the eyes of the king. The legendary Hades appeared in the world just like that. Originally, there was a very clear boundary between the human world and the Hades. That was darkness and day. People in the dark could see what people in the day were doing and saying. People in the day couldn't see the darkness. In fact, some people had never believed in reincarnation and ghosts. But when they saw the reflection in front of them, the whole capital was in chaos. Those scenes that could only be seen in books appeared in front of their eyes so realistically. Some of the ghosts were being whipped by the ghost envoys and were being grinded. Some were thrown into a pot of oil and fried beyond recognition. However, that was the result of all their suffering. That was why they kept jumping into the pot again and again. These scenes didn't appear for long, because soon, the king of hell, who was in charge of the underworld, found something suspicious. He waved his long sleeves, and his handsome face was full of wild power. "What's going on?" Reporting to my lord, someone opened the door of the underworld with one punch. The judge stammered. The king of hell kicked him away, and was very angry. "Of course I know that the door of the underworld has been opened by someone. I'm asking who that person is." Everything in the underworld was seen by the human world. Although it was only a short time of 10 seconds, for him, the king of hell, it was a blatant provocation. Yes. The judge didn't finish speaking. There was a bang. The wooden door of the 18th floor of hell was kicked into pieces. As the wood chips flew, Beligaju walked towards the king of hell, and only said 2 words coldly, "It's me." Chapter 862. When the love rivals met, their eyes would turn red. Although this love rival was decided unilaterally by the king of hell, as long as the king of hell saw the face that was nobler than his own, he would want to beat the other party up. Emperor of the heavenly axiom? The king of hell laughed evilly. His bloodthirsty look was on par with his son's. Beligaju did not beat around the bush. His black robe fluttered, and his figure was as quick as a shadow. He directly swept towards the king of hell, and reached out to pinch the king of hell's neck. "Where is she?" "She? Who?" The king of hell was very baffled, and his anger grew. "Don't think that just because my wife likes you, I won't dare to do anything to your face. If it wasn't because I hurt you so that you could use the trick of injuring yourself to gain my wife's trust, I would have done it long ago." When Beligaju was still the emperor, many fairy-like women used his actions to ask for their other halves. The king of hell had hated this person for a long time. What cold as before, noble and luxurious. To put it bluntly, he was the same as him. They both killed without batting an eyelid. However, the other party was better at disguising himself. Wasn't it to better get close to the phoenix of Buddhism? Wait a minute, could it be that he came here to look for Phoenix? The king of hell suddenly felt a little gloating. A wild smile hung at the corner of his mouth. "What's wrong? Your wife also ran away. Good job of running away." Bang! As soon as the king of hell finished speaking, Beligaju's fist landed. With the wind from the punch, it hit the king of hell's face. If it was someone else, they would definitely not be able to withstand this punch. However, the king of hell was not someone else. He turned his head and spat out the blood in his mouth. Then, he grabbed Beligaju's wrist and returned the punch with his other fist, not to be outdone. When the two of them fought, it was like 2 stars colliding. Every time they moved, the Hades would vibrate. The judge held his head in his hands, trembling as he stood at the side. He watched as countless undead were reduced to nothingness in the battle between the two of them. Even the decorations in the Hades were shattered into pieces. As he fought, King of Hell felt that something was definitely wrong. He wiped the blood at the corner of his mouth with his finger and said, "Motherfucker, are you doing this on purpose?" You specifically chose to fight in my territory. You're just afraid of ruining it, right? If you have the ability to go to the heavenly Tao, I will also shatter your divine palace for you. The king of hell's words meant that he wanted to stop the war. After all, he was always the one who started the fight. Baligaju would only fight with him if he was impatient. But this time, it was obviously different. Baligaju did not even listen to him. He raised his leg and kicked the king of hell into the wall at the side. Then he looked at him condescendingly and said in an extremely cold voice, "I'll ask you one last time, where is she?" Heh. The king of hell laughed softly. He did not care about the blood on his body. He looked up at Baligaju and said, "Do you not understand? Or are you deceiving yourself? Even if Phoenix's soul is gone, it is impossible for her to come to the Hades. She is the only Phoenix in the world." Baligaju clenched his fingers one by one. His chest hurt, but the color of his eyes became redder and redder, as if they were filled with blood. The judge was afraid that something would really happen to the Hades. He squatted down in fear. As he untied the rope on his little king of hell, he lowered his voice and said, "Little Highness, you should go outside and take a look. That emperor has fought his way into the underworld. He and the king of hell are fighting right now. If they continue fighting, all the ghosts will run out of the underworld. When that happens, it will be terrible." When the little king of hell heard that Baligaju had come, he put down his crossed legs and rushed out with his black axe. He originally thought that the other party was just looking for him to talk about old times. But when he saw those red eyes that were as red as blood, only then did the little king of hell realize that something must have happened. Because this man looked like he was about to go crazy. And his old man didn't like him. The little king of hell didn't know what his old man said to Baligaju. He saw that the man's originally fast movements suddenly stop. He stood there with his slender body, and the shadow under his feet was very long. He looked like he had lost his soul. He covered his face with one hand, and didn't care that his hand was dripping with blood. Looking at him from afar, he actually made people feel a sense of loneliness. That's right, it was lonely. Even though there were countless demons hovering above him, even though he could control the fate of the world, the little king of hell still thought of this word. It was as if the man had been punched in the heart. The evil aura bloomed under his feet, and even the black stones of hell were crushed by him. Black wings that symbolized evil even formed behind his back. That kind of evil energy was simply unstoppable. "I've already said that this is a lunatic." The little king of hell growled as he raised his black axe and blocked in front of Baligaju. His entire body was burning with the fire of purgatory. Baligaju turned his eyes and looked at him. His eyes were as red as blood. "Get lost. Even if you kill everyone here, you won't change anything." The little king of hell gritted his teeth. His gaze landed on the baby crawling by his feet. "Wait a minute, what's that? You're fighting with a child?" Baligaju chuckled and moved his fingers away from his face. His handsome face had never shown any evil. He didn't answer the little king of hell's question. Instead, he laughed in a gloomy voice. "Since she's not here, I'll destroy Hades and go to Buddhism to find her. If Buddhism still doesn't have her, I'll destroy this world." He's serious. That was the first thought that flashed through the little king of hell's mind. His second thought was, fucking hell. If the world was destroyed, how would he be able to chase after his little hook? Although they weren't from the same era, how could there be a future without a past life? Calm down. The little king of hell decided to appeal to his emotions. Can you carry the child under your feet first? He's next to the fire of hell. If he falls, he'll be burned to death. Speaking of this, the little king of hell seemed to have thought of something. No, why would this child come to our Hades? The judge was afraid of death and didn't dare to stand. He could only lie on the ground and whisper into the little king of hell's ear. Your Highness, I think that's the emperor's son. Look at his eyes. Only then did the little king of hell realize that the crawling baby's eyes were red. He even had a bloodthirsty smile on his face, as if he was playing a game. He didn't seem afraid of falling into the fire at all. With his aptitude, even if he fell into the sea of hellfire, he would treat it as a hot spring bath. Thinking of this, the little king of hell narrowed his eyes and said to the figure that was destroying the world, Do you want to destroy your child with the phoenix as well? Chapter 863. Beligage's figure paused for a moment. It was just that the pause was very short. So short that it was almost unnoticeable. He's a devil, and a devil won't die. Beligage's smile was bloodthirsty, and the evilness almost seeped into his bones. Only then did the little king of hell truly realize that there was no way to stop this man. Without the phoenix, he had returned to being the great devil, who was once known for his murderous ways. Tian Dao and Buddhism would once again face a crisis that was not inferior to diabolism. What he was afraid of was that the Beligage this time would be more destructive than the previous one. At that time, he simply liked power, and there was always room for leeway in his careless heart. Anyway, it was fine as long as he could defeat people. Now he was still elegant, but under that elegance was an unrestrained killing intent. If he really destroyed the underworld, the sixth Tao would be in chaos. No, he had to stop this man. The little king of hell's figure flashed and quickly blocked in front of Beligaju. His voice was loud and clear. Phoenix once came to the underworld to look for me. In an instant, the boiling sea of fire in the underworld fell back again. Beligaju picked up the little king of hell. His voice was very low, so low that it was even a little hoarse. What do you know? The torment of losing Hellion Vivian made him want to go berserk almost every moment. However, Beligaju forced himself to endure, because he was not sure if he could find any hope here. The little king of hell looked at him. Phoenix should have known something in advance, so she came to the underworld to look for me. She wanted to see her fate. I also told her that there is no record of her life and death in the underworld, not only hers, but also yours, the emperor. You were born in chaos, and no one can control you except the sixth Tao. She is the only variable in Buddhism, so there is no record of her in the Book of Life and Death. There is only one book that can record her. Tianji. Without waiting for the little king of hell to finish, Beligaju said with a dark expression. Legend has it that only the owner can open it? The little king of hell nodded. Rather than calling it a book, it would be better to call it a huge calculation. When it is running, there will be countless numbers of calculations and speculations. The one who can really see something from it is Phoenix. But just like what the world says, the owner of the heavenly mystery will only appear when he wants to. You mean to make me wait? Beligage's voice carried the calm before the storm. The little king of hell wasn't afraid of him, because only by finding Tianji's owner can we know if Phoenix has really disappeared. I know that you've never waited for anything before. But this time, you can either wait, or you can destroy the entire world, and still not change the outcome. He knew that this sentence would definitely convince the other party. This was because he knew that in this man's heart, Phoenix was more important than anything else. This included even his innate pride. As expected, Beligaju slowly released his grip on the little king of hell's neck. The churning aura behind him also gradually calmed down. Those dead souls, who had almost been burned into ashes, were finally saved. They lay on the ground, gasping for air. The tremors in hell returned to normal. The infernal judge who was hiding under the table also crawled out with a brush in his hand. The king of hell was the most annoyed. He had just gathered his strength and wanted to fight Beligaju, but he didn't expect the other party to suddenly stop. He didn't even look at the king of hell as he walked over. His left leg was being held tightly by a child. The king of hell looked at the child for a while and suddenly laughed. He decided not to find trouble with Beligaju. As long as his son was around, it would be a huge trouble. Outside hell, Azure Dragon and Fire Qilin originally thought that this place would be shaken to dust. They were prepared for their master to go completely berserk. They didn't expect their master to walk out of the darkness alone. He seemed to have regained his calmness, but his eyes were red as if he would start a massacre at any time. Go find the one with the surname Pei. Whether he's in Tian Dao or Buddhism, find him even if you have to dig 3 feet into the ground. Hearing this order, Fire Qilin and Azure Dragon looked at each other and bowed their heads in response. Yes. They couldn't figure out what His Highness was thinking now. Had he really regained his calmness? Fire Qilin and Azure Dragon looked at the tall figure walking in front of them. It was unknown when it started to snow, but the fog lingered in the air. Even when people spoke, they could exhale. Logically speaking, It shouldn't snow in this season. However, because of Baligaju, the snow was getting heavier. Baligaju's face didn't show anything. He walked in front of them like a walking corpse. His left leg was hugged by a little demon with a short and thick arm. The little demon was not afraid of the cold at all, nor was he afraid of Baligaju's hostility. He directly used his father's leg as a teething club, and gnawed there with an evil smile. The snow fell like goose feathers on the tree branches, on the roof beams, and on the long wooden chair. It seemed that this winter would never pass. The lonely figure like snow was like a painting splashed with ink. The black and white were distinct as he stood in the middle of the palace. His long hair fluttered, and his handsome face was cold. At this moment, nothing could be felt from this man. Pride, elegance, contempt, mockery, weakness, and cruelty. He just stood there. His long and thick eyelashes were stained with snow. The marble under his feet shattered inch by inch, staining the blood flowing from his fingertips. At that moment, Azure Dragon and Fire Qilin understood that their master didn't recover his calm. Instead, he hid his ruthlessness even deeper, so deep that it made people feel uneasy. However, they didn't know that Baligaju was only thinking about that person. He never thought that the phoenix he raised would leave, because he didn't think about it. When he lost her, it hurt so much. It wasn't a very intense feeling. It was just that his throat hurt, his eyes hurt, and his chest felt like it was completely hollowed out. Fire Qilin didn't dare to look at his master. He knew that he had to find the one surnamed Pei. If there was no news of the one surnamed Pei, his master would definitely destroy the entire world when he exploded again. However, Fire Qilin was afraid that when they really found the one surnamed Pei, he would tell them that the princess was no longer around. At that time, his master's reaction would be even stronger than now. Fire Qilin didn't dare to think about that ending. The only thing he could do was think of a way to find the person as soon as possible. Chapter 864. It was nighttime. 21st century, Wuxia imperial capital. The endless stream of cars ran through the city without stopping. Standing in front of the French window on the 31st floor, one could almost see the entire city at night. A group of men were sitting there playing poker. All of them had good looks and wore black t-shirts. Even though they were sitting there with no interest in life, one could tell that this group of people was different from ordinary people. The room was connected from top to bottom, like a duplex. The whole room was bright, and the decoration was sturdy. The smell of freshly boiled coffee filled the room, giving it a special feeling. If boss doesn't come back soon, this life will be boring. A man in a pure white suit leaned against the second floor and drank a mouthful of wine. He looked down at his friends who were playing poker. Isn't it boring to play poker all day? One of the baldies threw the old K in his hand onto the coffee table and curled his lips at the person beside him with a cigar in his mouth. It's better than El fiddling with his guns all day, wiping them 10 times a day. He's almost married to his weapons. The man in the suit sighed and put down the wine glass in his hand. He went downstairs and said, "Forget it, I'm going out to pick up girls. Call me when boss comes back." Boss said that if she doesn't give us any news for a month, we will wait here. The young man with the gun looked up coldly. "Do you want to be beaten up into a honeycomb again?" The man in the suit raised his hand. "Hey El, don't be so serious. I'm just saying. Since boss said to wait, we have to wait. But we still have to eat, right?" The young man pursed his lips. He didn't think about this problem. The man in the suit smiled. "I knew you guys don't have common sense. But don't worry, I've ordered takeout. Judging by the time, the delivery guy should be here soon." Just as he finished speaking, there was a knock on the door. The young man put away the gun in his hand and covered it with his black leather jacket. Then he signaled the man in the suit to open the door with his eyes. The man in the suit didn't care that he was the one being ordered. He held his wallet and was about to pay the delivery guy outside the door. However, he didn't expect that the person standing outside the door wasn't a delivery guy. Instead, it was boss. The youth behind him, who had always been calm, suddenly stood up. The rest of the men who were playing poker also stopped playing. All of them widened their eyes and looked at Helly and Vivian, who appeared in front of them. The man in the suit stuttered. "Boss, why are you carrying a child? Where did this come from?" I gave birth to him, Helene Vivian said without turning her head. Her voice was very indifferent. Close the door. The man in the suit didn't know how to react. B-boss, what did you just say? You gave birth to her. Since when can you get pregnant? I'm in a bad mood. Helene Vivian held the baby in one hand and looked at him with a smile. If you want to be beaten, continue to make noise. The man in the suit immediately shut his mouth. However, he was still curious. Why did boss go out and have a child? Calculating the time, it didn't seem possible. The young man also felt that it was inconceivable. He looked at Helene Vivian seriously and asked, Boss, is this child really yours? She didn't pick him up on the street? Yes. Helene Vivian walked to the sofa and sat down. She gently patted the baby in her arms. Her body hadn't fully recovered. From the moment she opened her eyes, she tried her best to give birth to the child. If it weren't for the baby, she would have suspected that she had a very long dream after she fell into a coma. The dream was so beautiful that she didn't want to wake up. However, not only the baby, but also the power that suddenly awakened in her body told her that everything in the past was all real. Her soul traveled back in time to 1,000 years ago, and she found the memories that she should have had. Previously, she didn't understand why she saw her own death in the purgatory light of Buddha of Buddhism. Now she understood. According to the original destiny, she couldn't escape the heavenly punishment. Once the baby was born, she would be turned into ashes. However, because of what Bodhi did, she got back her phoenix dharma form. Therefore, she was still the phoenix, but she had to return to her own place. However, she wanted to go back to the man who always knocked her head and called her an idiot. The man in the suit saw that Helene Weiwei's expression was not right. He had never seen their boss show such an expression. It was as if she had lost something and couldn't get it back no matter how hard she tried. After all, the man in the suit was very experienced in the relationship between men and women. At first glance, he knew that their boss's current expression was definitely related to the child's father. However, he really couldn't imagine who could overpower their boss. One should know that when their boss picked up a gun, it was as if she was the queen herself. There were not many people who dared to make a move on her. Unless young Master Tang? No, that's impossible. Young Master Tang never let any woman get close to him, except for his little childhood sweetheart. Even their boss was the same. In other words, their boss's child was very likely to have an unknown father. Contrary to what the man in the suit had thought, the rest of the people were just like what he had said. They were all rough men, and did not have such delicate observation skills. They just stared at the baby in Helene Weiwei's arms uniformly with their eyes. Not only was the baby not shy, but his eyes were clear, and he was born with a noble air. Looking at those people, their hearts were itching. Boss, let me hold the baby. I can coax him to sleep. Fuck off, you're so big. It's so uncomfortable for the baby to sleep in your arms. Also, you're so strong. What if you hurt the baby? I'll carry her. I'm the most suitable person to carry her. The men pushed each other with fierce looks on their faces, but when they arrived in front of the baby, they smiled tenderly. The man in the suit reached out and touched his forehead. Did these people really not notice that something was wrong with their boss? LK Jean, S. Lao A. Helene Vivian softly interrupted their noise. Her voice was very light but very serious. I've decided to stop and not accept any more missions. I'm here today to tell you this. I will live here in the future, but the ghost team will be disbanded. You can go wherever you want to go according to the rules of the underworld. My whereabouts and true identity are completely confidential. If someone finds this place in the future, I will never let him go back alive. When the young L heard that the ghost team was disbanded, his eyes widened instantly, but he couldn't say a word. The man in the suit and Laue looked at each other and whispered, Boss wants to protect the baby, so she wants to disband the ghost team. Chapter 865. Helene Vivian looked up and said with a tired voice, It's not entirely because of the baby. I haven't been in a good condition recently. It's not suitable for me to accept missions. Young L looked at her and sat back in his seat. His voice was very soft. I'm not leaving. I'll stay. I'll stay too. If you don't want to accept missions, then so be it. Olde was big and his laughter was somewhat deafening. We can take advantage of this time to raise the baby. Boss, what's your next plan? Hellion Weiwei knew that these brothers of hers did not want her to be alone. Although they were a group of rough men, they could still give her warmth at times. I want to open a car repair shop. I'll lay low for 2 years until the baby can walk. The main reason was that she wanted to see if there was any way to go back. Okay, then we'll open a car repair shop. The man in the suit was excited and wanted to hold the baby in Hellion Vivian's arms. However, as soon as he reached out his hand, he saw a black dog head faintly appear beside him. The dog head's eyes were blood red. It stared at him and was very creepy. The man in the suit immediately retracted his hand. When he looked carefully again, only the baby's noble and cute little face could be seen. It was as if what he saw just now was just an illusion. What was that just now? The man in the suit didn't believe in illusions. In their line of work, they were more sensitive than ordinary people. Hellion Vivian didn't want to hide from her good brothers. She simply said to the person behind her, "Little Black, come out." In the next second, a black wind seemed to blow in the room. In the fog, a black magical dog slowly walked out of the air and stood behind Hellion Vivian. Its eyes were scarlet. The man in the suit narrowed his eyes. At first glance, he knew that this wasn't an ordinary black dog. The others also looked at each other and didn't say anything. They just waited for Hellion Vivian to speak. Whether you believe it or not, after being in a coma for a month, when I woke up, not only did I have a baby, but my eyes also had a problem. Hellion Vivian glanced at the brothers standing in front of her. Now I can see ghosts. Hearing that, everyone swallowed a mouthful of saliva. They were all in disbelief. One had to know that in their line of work, they were all materialists. Ghosts and gods did not exist in their eyes. However, after the shock, there was a strong sense of interest. Especially the man in the suit. Since that's the case, why don't we take advantage of the free time to take on some private jobs? After saying that, he winked at Hellion Vivian. We can also earn some money for milk powder. Hellion Weiwei smiled and agreed with what he said. S was in charge of the finances of the spirit organization. S was equivalent to the financial manager and business manager of the Phantom. In less than a day, he found a piece of land in the capital of Wuxia. The location of the land was very mysterious. There were antique shops on both sides of the road. At the end of the road was a kindergarten, and there was only one car repair shop. From that day onwards, the famous ghosts of both the black and white sides were disbanded. No one knew where they had gone. Some said that they had entered the National Defense Department. Some said that they had gone to the Sahara. And some said that they had gone to Dubai to fish for gold. But in fact, only the young master of the Tang sect knew. This group of thugs didn't go anywhere. They concealed their identities on an inconspicuous street and lived the most ordinary life. Young master, don't we have to do anything? In front of the large floor-to-ceiling window, a young man wearing a black mask asked the man sitting in the office chair in a low voice. The man smiled, shook the goblet in his hand twice, and gently took a sip of the red liquid inside. He said in an evil tone, "No, let them be happy. When necessary, ghosts will wake up again." "Yes, young master." The young man paused and said, "This time, the ghost should be asleep because of that child." The man raised his eyebrows, and the corners of his mouth were full of playfulness. "Weiwei's child? Then give her more red packets. You'll send the money." The young man lowered his eyes and accepted the order without saying anything. Like a shadow, he carried a wooden box and shuttled through the night scene of the city. When he appeared again, he was already standing in front of the car repair shop. Hellion Vivian also recognized him. She looked at the mask on his face, and then at the wooden box on the ground. "Young Master Tang sent this?" "Yes." The young man's appearance was too handsome, and his eyes were also very good-looking. "It doesn't make a difference even if you have a baby. I thought you would gain some weight. Other than young Master Tang's gift money, there's also my gift for you. It's all in the box." After saying that, the young man buckled the black hat on his head and disappeared into the night street on a skateboard under his feet. Hellion Vivian had just opened the box when she was dazzled by the glittering gold inside. Then, she saw the additional gift that the young man had mentioned. It was a certificate of the baby's household registration in the capital. However, what made Hellion Vivian's head hurt was the surname on it was Hellion. Our baby's surname is Bailey. Hellion Vivian shook her head. Her eyes looked at the hazy sky and could vaguely hear the noise coming from the car repair shop. All day, how many times have I told you not to let little boss take your gun? It will go off accidentally. Also, did you forget to change little boss's diaper again? My God. Elle, put away your explosives. We're running a car repair shop now, not an arms dealer. Jean, if I see you secretly feeding little boss German stout again, I'll post the fact that you like men on Weibo. The man in the suit vaguely felt like he was going crazy. 6 rough men raising a little Prince Charming, plus Hellion Vivian, this carefree mother. Who knows what kind of person Bao Bao will be raised into? The only thing that can be confirmed is that Bao Bao is definitely not to be trifled with. However, compared to Bao Bao, the fact that Bao Bao is not to be trifled with is what really makes people unable to sleep. Early in the morning, in the huge palace, Eunuch Sun was panting and chasing a little boy in a yellow brocade robe all over the floor. Little Highness, wait for me, Little Highness. The little boy didn't do anything, but he was stepping on an evil spirit who originally planned to steal food in the palace. The evil smile on the corner of his mouth was very vicious. Except for Green Dragon and Fire Qilin, who were following behind him, the rest of the eunuchs and palace maids didn't know what he was doing at all. They thought that their Little Highness was just exercising a little more. After all, compared to ordinary children, the Little Highness was unusually smart, which had already formed his personality. Compared to the royal family, the Little Highness's personality was cooler and harder to manipulate. He never let people hold him, or maybe it was his innate arrogance that made it seem like he was looking down on everyone. Especially those eyes, which were like red and translucent gems. At first glance, people would feel that they were ancient and mysterious, but at the same time, full of evil. Chapter 866. This was what Bailey Jiaju saw when he came out of the palace. The hostility on his body was getting more and more obvious. In contrast to the hostility, his expression was getting more and more indifferent, no matter who he was facing. Seeing him coming over, the big baby first looked up, then reached out his hand and held Beligage's long legs in his arms. There was a big evil smile at the corner of his mouth. Eunuch Sun knew that the Little Highness was going to pee when he saw his posture. He could not bear to look and covered his face. Beligaju naturally noticed the wetness on his feet. He reached out and lifted the child up, stripped the child's clothes, and let him hang upside down on his legs for others to admire. The big baby was still smiling, but at this moment, his handsome little face was completely black. The pair of eyes that looked at Beligaju was definitely not friendly. Beligaju sneered and let the baby's eyes meet his. Son, you better be good, don't provoke me. The big baby narrowed his eyes. His expression was very cold. It was obvious that he did not respect Beligaju. Beligaju's eyes were faintly hiding a murderous aura. He glanced at Green Dragon and Fire Qilin. Is there still no news of the one with the surname Pei? Not in Buddhism, not in Tiandao. Qilin and I made a preliminary judgment that he is in the human world. Green Dragon lowered his eyes, his long hair brushing the ground. Beligaju suppressed the rage in his heart. His voice was cold. Find him or do something to make him come out. The one with the surname Pei shouldn't want to see too many people die in the human world. When Green Dragon and Fire Qilin heard Beligaju's words, they knew what he wanted to do. His Highness' idea of destroying the world had never changed. As time passed, this idea would become more and more ingrained. They had to speed up, otherwise, all the demons in the entire divine mainland would appear under his command and occupy the human world. Of course, this result was not bad for them. After all, they had been like this hundreds of years ago. However, both Green Dragon and Fire Qilin knew that the only way to make their master feel better was not to destroy anything, but to find the princess again. The Fire Qilin had been by Beligaju's side for the longest time, and this kind of situation had happened before. Back then its master was still a child. But it was that child who tore apart dozens of demons with his bare hands after the princess consort disappeared. The people in the palace also died because of the pressure released by His Highness. At that time, His Highness' primordial spirit had yet to return to its original position. Even he himself could not withstand the power he released at that moment. Right now, His Highness was both a celestial being and a demon being. If he wanted to, he could even cause the 6 paths to go into chaos. Therefore, history could not be allowed to repeat itself. What the fire Qilin didn't expect was that its master would explode so quickly. About 3 months later, his subordinates replied that they had seen traces of Pei and Dunhuang. They had indeed arrived at the boundless desert, but they couldn't find anyone. There was only an ancient city standing tall in the middle of the desert. The city was like an ancient Greek temple. It wasn't complete, but it was incomplete. There was no one inside, and the temperature was so high that it made people feel thirsty. Occasionally 1 or 2 reptiles could be seen on the sand. The surroundings were like a golden desert. It was a barren land that stretched as far as the eye could see. When the wind blew, one could see the white bones inside. This place was not simple. This was the fire Qilin's first reaction, but it didn't know where it was. Only Beligaju stood in the middle of the barren half of the desert city. Suddenly, he stretched out his right hand and grabbed the side of his body. A slender and ice-cold black shadow immediately appeared. However, he was also very fast. He stood on his heels and hovered in the air, holding a black leather notebook in his hand. The man was very handsome. He looked cold as if he had just walked out of a coffin. His hair was very long and black like a waterfall. There was not a single strand of messy hair. He should have looked harmless, but there was no trace of human life in him. Death. Beligaju narrowed his eyes. The pressure was not to be ignored. Where is Pei? The death closed the notebook. His voice was very calm and normal. I'm looking for him too. When Bailey Jiaju heard that sentence, he knew that the one with the surname Pei was no longer here. Since that was the case, he could only force him out. Bailey Jiaju did not spread the news to look for the one with the surname Pei. Instead, he returned to the magical realm 3,000 feet below. He sat on the high and mighty dark throne with one hand supporting his chin. He looked at the group of demons gathered under his feet with a cold and bloodthirsty expression. He opened his thin lips slightly and uttered only one word: kill. For thousands of years, the demons that surrounded Mount Buzhou followed an unknown order. Unless they were very hungry, they would never rush into the human world. Now their king finally had no more scruples. Naturally, they didn't have to follow so many rules anymore. This was a carnival that belonged to the demons. Every huge black shadow rushed out of the ground with a low roar. Such a huge evil was enough to flatten the entire 3 realms and 6 Dao. Moreover, the man leading this group of demons was Beligaju, the emperor of the heavenly Dao that all the gods and Buddhas found difficult to deal with. The first wave of demons to be destroyed were the bandits who had done many evil deeds. It wasn't because Beligaju had a strong sense of justice. It was just that those bandits had bad lives. They could have blocked anyone, but they just had to block the royal, who had just come out of the demon world. Hey, I say, your clothes are not bad. Take them off and I'll let you live. That group of bandits could be considered the most difficult to deal with in the desert. Every time they went to the surrounding towns to rob, they would hide in the desert. The imperial court had besieged them dozens of times, but still couldn't take them down. Firstly, they were too cunning and familiar with desert warfare. Secondly, they were all very strong, especially the leader of the bandits who had a scar on his face. He looked like a fugitive. What? So scared that you can't even speak? The leader of the bandits looked at Beligaju in disdain. The group of people behind him on horseback laughed. However, before they could laugh enough, they saw many huge creatures behind Beligaju's black cloak in the wind. Each of them was huge, with blood-red eyes and fangs that were slightly exposed. They could tear them apart at any time. Beligaju just stood there. He didn't even look up. He just laughed softly. Every bandit felt the pain of their hearts exploding. The leader of the bandits had a twisted expression. With a bang, he fell from his horse into the desert in a bloody mess. The group of demons was like a darkness that could swallow all life. Inch by inch, they spread across the entire desert. The last two bandits who didn't ride a horse looked at this scene trembling. Their legs went weak, and they knelt on the ground. Originally, they couldn't keep their lives. However, at this moment, a gentle and elegant laugh sounded in the air. Chapter 867. As expected of the Emperor, you've helped me solve a huge problem. I've been looking for this group of robbers for a long time. I hate it when people touch my money. Unfortunately, I can't see, so I can't take revenge on them. The voice was very low, as if it was always smiling. However, isn't it too bloody to force me out like this? Bailey Jiaju looked back with an indifferent expression, only to see a man appear behind him. That man was dressed in a well-ironed tang suit. He was clearly walking in the wind and sand, but he was not stained by the slightest bit of dust. He seemed to be unable to see anything at all. His eyes were closed, and his eyelashes were very long. A bird landed on his shoulder. That bird seemed to be intelligent, looking at him with both eyes full of hostility. Apart from the bird, there was a small person behind him. The small person had dark circles under his eyes, and was carrying a huge gourd on his back. Beligaju was familiar with this small person. It was the ghost baby who had followed Jing Wushuang. However, he wasn't interested in why the ghost baby was following this man. Beligaju looked at the man and his eyes darkened. Where is she? Smart people didn't need to say too much when communicating with each other. Boss Pei smiled. I need to make a prediction. Even if it's a heavenly secret, I can only make a prediction after the variables appear. Upon hearing this, Beligaju's eyes landed on the Bodhi tree that the ghost baby was holding. Then, he lowered his eyes and bit off the black gloves on his hands. He bit his fair wrist, and the purest blood of the heavenly axiom dripped onto the Bodhi tree. Can you make a prediction now? Boss Pei couldn't see, but he was more transparent than people who could see. I thought that the Emperor wouldn't tolerate a love rival. I really don't want to see him. Beligaju's thin lips curled up coldly as he glanced at the Bodhi tree. So Boss Pei, you better have the information that I want. Boss Pei didn't mind being threatened like this. He pointed at the bird on his shoulder with his slender fingers. After the bird flew away, he slowly opened his eyes. As he opened his eyes, countless strands of power formed into slender threads. Those threads floated in the air and then gathered together, interweaving into a vast and ancient seal. It was as if the gears of time were rapidly turning and calculating. The surrounding fiendish demons could not withstand such power at all. Their expressions were all twisted. However, Beligaju only focused on men's calculations. Finally, he captured the information he was looking for from within. What was that place? The house was built higher than the heavenly Tao. And big birds flying here and there? Why would she have these things around her? Could it be? Beligaju's pupils trembled as he recalled what Hellion Vivian had told him a long time ago. She once said that she wasn't the real eldest daughter of the Hellion family. Instead, it was a soul from 1,000 years in the future. She's back where she belongs. Boss Pei closed his eyes, and the calculations stopped. Obviously, that place doesn't belong to the divine mainland. Beligaju retracted his gaze. No, that place also belongs to the divine mainland. It's just that it's the divine mainland 1,000 years in the future. Boss Pei didn't deny it. Obviously, this was also within his calculations. That's all I can do. Next, I have to help the ghost baby awaken its master. As for the business this time, Emperor, remember to send the money outside the exorcist city. Someone will come and collect it. Fire Qilin looked at the disappearing figure in the desert. He vaguely felt uneasy from the depths of his heart. The divine mainland 1,000 years in the future? How would Master go there? Would he really have to wait 1,000 years to meet the princess consort? Master might not have the patience to wait until then. After so many years, no one could control what would happen to the princess consort. 1,000 years, such a period of time, even for them, was frighteningly dull. It was too long, so long that they couldn't accept it. It wasn't that they couldn't wait 1,000 years. They could go to the underworld and reincarnate. Perhaps it would be 1,000 years when they were reborn as a human. However, that method didn't suit Master at all. Moreover, no one knew the exact location of the princess consort. They couldn't be sure which year it would be. The most despairing thing was that only the King of Hell could travel through time in the underworld. This was a special characteristic that even the Grim Reaper couldn't do. Thinking of this, Fire Qilin subconsciously looked at Beligaju's expression. His face was covered by his long hair. Only a pair of scarlet eyes could be vaguely seen. They were like the sea of blood that had been emptied in the underworld, with layers and layers of blood flowing out. 1,000 years? Beligaju put down the hand that was supporting his face and laughed softly. His hoarse voice was filled with a unique evil and overbearing aura. Do they really think that they can stop me just like that? Master. Fire Qilin looked at him worriedly. Bailey Jiaju's pair of eyes had already started to show a gold tint of paranoia. Countless sand and dust soared within the gale. Those resentful spirits from the ghost town, that were buried under the ground, were all sucked into this unknown force. The underworld shook violently. It was more turbulent than ever before. Large rocks fell from the first hell to the 18th hell. Even the ghost envoys couldn't bear it, and fell into the sea of blood. The little King of Hell was still looking at himself in the mirror. As he looked at himself, a bump appeared on his head. He was instantly enraged. He slapped the ground and stood up. What the hell is going on? Can't you let me sculpt with peace of mind? What's wrong with the human world? His father always threw the matters of the underworld to him, and didn't do his job properly. Little Highness. The judge crawled out strenuously and raised his head. Someone set up a blood formation in the human world. Blood formation? The little King of Hell's handsome little face froze. He didn't bother to comb his hair and immediately stood up. It must be the great demon who set it up. He must have found the phoenix. Isn't the blood formation a formation that can tear apart time and space? I want to go there too. Little Highness, it's dangerous, it's dangerous. The judge desperately hugged the little King of Hell's waist. The little King of Hell kicked him away domineeringly. Dangerous my ass. I'm not the one who set up the formation. If it succeeds, I might be able to follow it to the modern world. Don't think that my father can extinguish my love for Little Hook, just because he put me in the ancient world. The judge couldn't stop their Little Highness at all. If it wasn't for the Grim Reaper who appeared at the door in time, the little King of Hell would definitely run away. If you go, you'll only be used as a sacrifice. The Grim Reaper stood at the door with a black notebook in his hand. He reached out and pushed up the glasses on his face. Don't forget about your physique, little seven. The little King of Hell cursed in a low voice. His face was unusually fierce. From what you're saying, isn't the human world going to be destroyed? Chapter 868. The people of the underworld only care about the dead. We don't care about what happens to the human world. After saying that, the Grim Reaper stood aside and watched the black stone roll past his feet with an indifferent expression. He was as cold-blooded as ever. In the desert, the blood-colored array left a complicated and ancient mark on the ground. Countless demonic beasts and ghosts were sucked into the array. The moment they entered, they exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Then, this blood mist would quickly be transported to every line of the formation, lighting them up. A day and a night passed just like that. People watched as the demonic beasts on the ground were sucked into the thick clouds by some strange force. They had never seen such a terrifying force before. Many people began to kneel on the stone steps of the hidden spirit temple, burning incense and praying to Buddha. They wanted to disperse the black fog that covered the sky. However, to Beligaju, this power was still not enough. Just the demonic beasts as sacrifices was not enough to satisfy the blood array. Therefore, he began to catch the dead spirits. He let those evil spirits open the way for him. As a result, the black fog gathered in the sky grew larger and larger. The blood aura that soared into the sky eventually caused adverse reactions in the surroundings. The plague, snakes, and insects that were originally hiding in the ground crawled out. When the wild beasts that were originally living in the forest appeared in the capital, every citizen was so scared that their faces turned pale. Almost everyone knew that the heavens of the divine land were about to change. When demons were about to appear, there would be disaster. When the experienced exorcists saw this scene, they knew that something must be causing trouble. As members of the exorcist tribe, they could not just stand by and watch. Their first reaction was to gather a large group of exorcists and find the gathering place of the blood array to stop it. Evil creature, you'd better stop now. Otherwise, once the divine exorcism seal is activated, you won't be able to keep the last trace of your soul. Baligaju did not speak. He did not even look back. He just stood in the middle of the array with a gloomy expression. His handsome side profile was as cold as ice. Those old exorcists had never been ignored like this. They looked at each other and raised the peach with swords in their hands. Since you don't know how to repent at all, we can only enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. With that, the exorcists raised their feet and rushed toward Baligaju. Baligaju still didn't turn his head. He waved his sleeve. A loud bang was heard. The exorcists were all knocked to the ground by him. The exorcists were unconvinced. They clutched their aching chests and prepared to try again. Bailey Jiaju narrowed his eyes and reached out his hand in a certain direction. Suddenly, a high-level exorcist was grabbed by the throat by him. Since you want to die so much, I'll fulfill your wishes. With that said, Baligaju casually threw the exorcist into the array formation. Everyone's expression changed greatly. They quickly used the Nine Suns' true chant in an attempt to use magic light to trap Baligaju in place, in order to shatter his soul. However, what they did not expect was that the magic light could not hurt the man standing opposite them at all. It was already too late for them to retreat. This was because every time the other party stretched out his hand, he would grab an exorcist. Regardless of whether they were low-level or high-level, they were all like ants in his hands. All of them were thrown into the blood array. Without Hellion Vivian, in Baligaju's eyes, humans were just seasonings when he was bored. He was a demon. Demons had never had a heart. Unexpectedly, there were exorcists joining the fray. The black fog in the blood array became thicker. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in the sky, as if the end of the world was forming in an instant. However, in the face of such a phenomenon, Baligaju did not restrain himself at all. His deep eyes became even brighter, and his handsome features flowed with earth-shattering magic. Once the blood array was activated, all the living creatures in the surroundings would be attracted. Blood and spiritual energy were the nutrients that the array needed the most. Without giving the exorcists a chance to regret, as the last shell disappeared, a large cluster of black feathers suddenly erupted in the center of the blood array. It was as if there were wings flapping, piercing the sky. In the next moment, Baligaju walked out of the array. The black feathers fell under his feet as he walked. His entire body seemed to be shrouded in feathers. His devilishly handsome face made everyone feel apprehensive, because a black hole appeared above Baligaju's head. No one knew where that black hole led to, but the wind that blew out of the black hole seemed to be able to suck everything in. At the beginning, the black hole was very small, but it became bigger and bigger as it went on. It was as if another world had appeared outside the layers of black fog. Fire Qilin looked at this scene, and its eyes widened. What was that? Unbelievable. Even as an ancient divine beast, it had never seen such a scene. Master actually tore open a gap in time and space in the air. But that world was too strange, so strange that it exceeded all of Fire Qilin's knowledge of the world. After the gap in time and space appeared, Baligaju did not act immediately. He seemed to be looking for something. The more he confirmed, the redder his eyes became. The earth began to shake violently. Those black feathers were like sharp blades that could cut through everything. One by one, they stabbed into the shells of the demonic beasts. The capital also felt the tremors. Almost all the demonic beasts in the entire divine land went berserk at the same time. In the billowing dust, Baligaju's gaze finally found a point in the illusionary clouds. Fire Qilin knew that even if he could tear open a gap in time and space, if he did not find the right place, his master would still not be able to touch the princess. Therefore, every time was like a gamble. Baligaju's side profile did not change at all. His eyes were tightly narrowed. The black fog that was originally shrouding the sky suddenly rushed down and enveloped his entire body. In addition to him, countless demons and devils were also caught up in it. Low growls were heard. Because of the unknown that they were about to face, their voices were full of trembling. Debeo was the smartest. From the beginning, he hugged Baligaju's left leg. There was no trace of fear on his angel-like handsome little face. Instead, it was hard to hide his excitement. After all, he was a demon. From the moment he was born, he had a strong desire for blood and destruction. The black fog grew bigger and bigger, until it covered the entire ancient desert city. Bailey Jiaju and his entourage had completely disappeared from the divine mainland. Chapter 869. The death aura turned into a gale that raged in Sand City, until the black hole in the sky disappeared completely. Boss Pei, who was standing in the distance, suddenly remembered a scene in Buddhism many years ago. At that time, the young man's spine was very straight, even under the protection of the Vajra shield. The Buddha asked him if he wanted to convert. He just laughed mockingly, elegant and untamed. It was as if no one could subdue him. No matter how many difficulties there were in the future, he could flatten them all. No matter what kind of ferocious smile fate would show him, he would not lower his head either. And now, he was even more domineering, and wanted to trample everything under his feet. What gave him such a strong and complete belief? Was it Phoenix? Boss Pei lowered his head and curved his thin lips. His eyes were still blind, but there was a playful smile at the corner of his mouth. I wonder if the Demon Emperor will be able to adapt to the modern divine land. 3 years later. Imperial city of Wuxia. The roads here had been repaired from 5 rings to 6 rings. Everywhere he went there were cars. The property prices were rising very quickly. It was as if the price had doubled. Many people said that sometimes it was better to buy a commercial house than to work for half a year. They could sell it when the time came, and make a net profit. Even in such an environment, the repair shop in the old town continued to operate as usual. Due to the special location of this car repair shop, the price had been raised to a sky-high level. But no matter how high the price was, the owner of the car repair shop would smile and say, "Not for sale." The car repair shop was very strange. When they were happy, the employees would repair more cars. When they were unhappy, they would just lie in the sports car and bask in the sun. Of course, the most common thing this group of rough men did was to act cute in front of a little boy. "Little boss, I got a new bottle of wine. Want to drink?" "How many times have I told you? You can't let a child drink." The most handsome man stretched out his leg and kicked a 1.9-meter tall man to the side. That kind of lethality really didn't match his well-known face. "Little boss, from today onwards you'll officially start school. You must be able to withstand all kinds of temptations in the future. Otherwise, how can we feel at ease throwing you into that big dive out of a school?" Under the sun, the little boy's face could not be seen clearly, but his voice could be heard. There was a coldness in his tender voice that was not found in other children his age. "It's just a kindergarten. The kindergarten is even more dangerous." The suited man looked at the boy seriously and said, "Little boss, you don't understand. With your looks, even Auntie won't let you off. She will definitely want to stuff you into her pocket and take you away. Not to mention those little kids who are close to their beautiful peers." "Yes, yes, yes, yes." The car owner standing at the side nodded in agreement. Since there were men in suits in the garage, the people who came to repair the cars were mostly girls. Every one of them wore denim shorts, had long legs, and an all-shaped face. Even for people like them who would subconsciously frown when they saw children, when they saw the little boy, they couldn't help but want to reach out and pinch his little face. Heavens, what kind of parents could give birth to such a handsome boy? Especially the temperament he had. It was also strange. Logically speaking, he was raised by rough men who repaired cars. But this child had a cute and noble air about him, like a little prince left behind by a noble family. Now the little boy was carrying a school bag and wearing a pure white shirt with a black bow tie tied on it. He had soft short hair, deep eyebrows, and extremely bright eyes, like diamonds in the night sky, so clear that people couldn't help but look again and again. Old A also felt that it was too dangerous to let such a little boss go to school, so he suggested with a cigarette in his mouth, "If you want me to say, why not just stay in the garage and not go to kindergarten? Isn't it just learning math problems? Little boss can even woo-woo." Before Old A could finish his words, the suited man covered his mouth. "Are you stupid? Do you want everyone to know that our little boss is a child prodigy? Be careful, the boss will come out and kill you later. Speaking of which, why hasn't the boss come out yet? He must be sleeping in again. The little boy held his forehead with his small hand, as if he had a headache. When he spoke, his small canine teeth were exposed. I'll go up and wake Mom up. Uncle Olde, go prepare the milk. Mom wants to drink it when she wakes up. That was why species were so mysterious. It was really not easy for a group of rough men to raise a considerate little gentleman. Because the little boy was still very young, his walk was not very stable. He carried his small backpack and swayed as he walked up the stairs with his short little legs. Then, he climbed onto the 2-meter-wide white bed with a chuckle. The person under the blanket didn't open her eyes. She held the little boy in her arms, and then used her straight and small nose to sniff the little boy. The smell of milk on my son's body. Not bad, it smells very good. Obviously, the little boy was used to his mother's way of greeting. He sighed helplessly. Beauty Weiwei, although I want you to stay in bed. It's already 8 o'clock. There's still half an hour before your son reports to kindergarten. Shouldn't you consider washing your face and brushing your teeth now? Your sounds very good. Helian Weiwei finally opened her eyes and placed her son beside her. Little Qingchen, as someone who has been to school before, let me tell you something. As someone who is about to become a student, you must do 3 things in order to make your life perfect. 1 is to fall in love, and the other 2 are to play truant and be late. Since the weather is so good today, why don't you do the late thing while you're at it? When the car owners outside the window heard this, they took a step forward and almost tripped over their own high heels. Damn, who educates a child like this? It was not easy for the little prince of the car industry to not be led astray. Unfortunately, Helian Vivian herself didn't think there was anything wrong with her education. She firmly instilled the idea of being a domineering CEO into her son. The little boy reached out a finger and softly poked Helian Vivian's cheek. His eyes lit up as he asked, "Then did you and Dad meet when you were in school?" Helian Weiwei paused for a moment. The corners of her mouth curled up into a smile as she recalled the process of her meeting with Bailey Jiaju. She yawned and with a lazy voice, she let out a sound. The little boy asked again, "Then who wooed who first?" This time, Helian Vivian answered straightforwardly, "Of course I wooed him. As a domineering CEO, how can I let my other half confess first?" After hearing this reason, the little boy was deeply silent. Had no one ever told Mom that she had a problem with her self-image? Chapter 870. Oh right, if you meet someone you like in school, don't hold back. Remember that you're the son of an arms tycoon. When it's time to make a move, make a move. You can't let others waste good resources. Helian Weiwei said as she held little Bun in her arms and ravaged him. The little boy saved himself with great difficulty. His black hair curled up, and like a little adult, he handed the jeans on the chair to Helian Vivian. Pretty Vivian, I'm in kindergarten, not high school. It's too early to talk about liking someone. You have to start dating when you're young. Helian Weiwei casually pulled a pure black headband and tied up her long hair. That face, no matter when you looked at it, would always make people feel that it was breathtaking. She revealed a very serious expression. First of all, you must find a beautiful one. The little boy handed her the milk he had prepared. Pretty Vivian, don't tell me that you liked my dad's face back then. What else could it be? Helian Vivian reached out to pinch her son's little ears. She lazily stretched her waist. Other than his face, his body is not bad. And his voice. Children shouldn't ask so much. The little Bun. Did I ask around? Mom was the one who was willing to tell me. Ever since he was young, his bedtime stories were either general knowledge on how to dismantle a sniper rifle, or the specific plot of how his mom pursued his dad. For this, his mom had even written a so-called wife-chasing handbook. He had read that handbook before. Every time he read it, he felt that his dad, whom he had never met, was definitely a very sinister person. To be pursued by a woman with such a clear conscience, and to throw out bait from time to time, so that his mom would be more proactive. A man like this was very difficult to deal with. Little Qingchen, why are you in a daze? Let's go. Helly and Vivian patted the little bun's head. In order to wear matching outfits with her son, she was also wearing a shirt today. However, perhaps it was because of her outstanding face. Pure black leather pants matched with a clean white shirt, and a boy London soft leather cap. Under her waist-length chestnut hair was a black diamond ear stud. She looked very cool and eye-catching. There were even car owners who came to Xiaocheng to ask her if she was AT. After all, such a girl was always too eye-catching. That kind of beauty that blurred gender was really hard to ignore. In addition, she had a BMW Tomahawk that made people want to scream when they saw it. Whether it was the color or the lines of the heavy-duty motorcycle, it was extremely cool. There weren't many women who could drive an S1000RR unless they had long legs. Otherwise, they would be suppressed by the aura emitted by the car. However, for Helly and Vivian, the BMW Tomahawk was tailor-made for her. While supporting the car with her long legs, Helly and Vivian raised her right hand and pulled down the windshield with a snap. Many people couldn't take their eyes off them. The little boy was sitting in front of her, wearing the little helmet that Helly and Vivian had specially made for him. He was so handsome. This pair of mother and son seemed to be born to be a scenery line, galloping on the road in a flashy manner. The pedestrians on the road couldn't help but look back, especially the group of people who loved cars. Even if they were sitting in sports cars, they couldn't help but open the windows and whistle outside. This car is so cool. BMW Tomahawk, it's out of production, right? Look, the person riding the bike is a woman. Impossible. Do you think the Tomahawk is your family's scooter that anyone can ride casually? The driver who was knocked felt very wronged and bit his thin lips. That was really a woman riding the bike, okay? However, Helly and Vivian didn't stay on the road for long. The Tomahawk's speed was well known, especially when she bent down and sped up. People could only see the beautiful fiery curves flashing in front of their eyes valiantly. Hiss! Helly and Vivian parked the motorcycle, took off the helmet, and carried the little bun down. Your kindergarten is not bad. The kindergarten system in the capital was very complete, especially this one. Basically, they were all talents, so her son shouldn't be bored in there. And the little boy was very happy to be able to come to the kindergarten. He reached out and tugged at Helly and Vivian, reminding her in a very well-mannered manner. When I'm in class, you can't just run around. I'll end class at 5, then I'll go back by myself. Wait a minute, little Qingchen. I feel that there's something wrong with you. Usually, don't you ask me to pick you up? Helly and Vivian raised an eyebrow. Are you trying to do something behind my back? The little boy touched his forehead. I just want to walk by myself. Well, little Qingchen has learned to be independent. As Helly and Vivian spoke, she looked in the direction the little boy was looking at. There was a faint shadow there. The shadow was very small, and it was squatting in the shadow of the school gate. It was a child who had just died not long ago. Of course, the child also saw the little boy looking at him. His eyes suddenly widened, and he bounced over, extremely surprised. You can see me? You can actually see me. Helly and Vivian curled her lips into a smile, showing that she didn't want to care. Her eyes lazily looked at her son. The little bun was calm. I can see you, but if you don't go reincarnate and keep on harming others, I don't mind sending you on your way. When the little black shadow heard this, he knew that the other party was not to be trifled with. He originally wanted to reach out his small hand to touch the other party. Unexpectedly, as soon as he moved, a black dog appeared behind the little boy. The black dog was frighteningly big. Its eyes were as red as blood, and its whole body was emitting a thick black fog. Although the little black shadow had just died, he was at least a ghost. His innate ghost instinct told him that it was best to leave now. Otherwise, he wouldn't have a good ending. Thus, the little black shadow turned around in fear and completely disappeared. Helly and Vivian lowered her head and helped her son tidy up the small tie on his shirt. Dead spirits are formed by resentment. Be careful. Yes, the little boy replied, but in reality, he didn't care about these ghosts at all. His bloodline destined him to be arrogant. Hurry up and go back. The car dealership's business hasn't been good recently. If you don't work hard, I won't be able to pay for my school fees. The little boy said this because the mother and son had the same concept of money. That was to make money for fun. However, in the ears of others, it had a different meaning. Wei, why are you so miserable? I really didn't expect that the belle of the law faculty couldn't even pay for her son's school fees. Chapter 871. Hearing this, Helene Vivian playfully raised her eyebrows and looked in the direction of the voice. She saw a well-dressed lady standing not far away. She had a bag in her left hand and an extremely fat boy in her right hand. The boy was indeed too fat, and he didn't forget to eat ice cream. Perhaps it was a problem with his education, but the little fatty's gaze was very unkind. He was more or less tainted by his mother's aura, and he looked at everyone with an arrogant gaze. Mom, where did this country bumpkin come from? He looked a little older than Helene Qingchen, and when he spoke, he didn't forget to glance in Helene Vivian's direction. The lady laughed softly, and the charm in her voice was obvious. What country bumpkin? He's a classmate of Mom's when she was in school. He's just a little down now. Don't look down on them, understand? Down? The little boy smiled, and didn't want to talk to this kind of person. He looked at Helene Vivian and said, Beauty Vivian, I'll go in first. Remember what I said, don't run around. Helene Vivian always felt that her son's expression sometimes resembled a certain highness, so she nodded and didn't say anything. Seeing their reaction, the lady suddenly laughed. Vivian, we haven't seen each other for 3 years. Back then, you were a famous person in school. Life really makes a man. I thought you went to be a lawyer somewhere, but now it seems that's not the case. Helene Vivian looked at her and her smile deepened. Yes, I didn't become a lawyer. Why? Is it important? That's not it. When the lady spoke, she always gave people a very elegant atmosphere. It's just that we haven't seen each other in a long time, and I wanted to talk to you about the old days. Hee, since you're not a lawyer, what are you doing? Helene Wei looked at her son swaying back as he walked into the kindergarten. There was no need for her to stay any longer at the entrance of the kindergarten. She nonchalantly said to the rich lady, I'm here to repair the car. Repair the car? The woman's tone changed strangely, and then she laughed again. That's really hard work, Wei. My husband has invested in this kindergarten, and now he is also a director of the school. If you need any help, just tell me. Sometimes self-esteem is not worth much. Helene Vivian yawned. No need. She still had that calm expression on her face. The rich lady remembered that she had always been like this during her university years. She always missed classes and seemed very mysterious. However, when she appeared, she would always steal everyone's limelight. There were many people who chased after Helene Vivian in university. There were so many of them that the rich lady still felt a little angry when she thought about it now. However, if those people were to find out that a top law student had been reduced to fixing cars for others, what kind of scene would that be? It seemed that it was time to find a time to gather with everyone. The noblewoman handed the bag in her hand to the housekeeper behind her, and then said to the little fatty, Son, if anyone bullies you, you must tell Mom, understand? Listen to your teacher, and don't eat during class. Then come and pick me up when I'm done with class. The little fatty was very clingy, and his mouth twitched. Why is there such a country bumpkin in the school that Dad invested in? He's even more handsome than me. My limelight has been stolen by him. The rich lady smiled. All right, we're not from the same world. Besides, how is our family Xiao Hang worse than him? He's a head taller than him. Hearing the praise, the little fatty raised his head and puffed out his chest. However, the passers-by who were watching this scene chuckled. They thought to themselves, your son is indeed taller than others. Why don't you say that your son is 3 times fatter than the other person? As for the appearance, anyone with eyes could see that the difference was too big. There was no comparison at all. If a child was raised astray, they would be more vicious than adults. For example, when little Fatty Cheng saw Helene Qingchen's face, he was so angry that he purposely said that he was a mechanic in front of the whole class. Helene Qingchen didn't even acknowledge him. His big black eyes were rolling around. From afar, there wasn't anything special about them. However, upon closer inspection, they were different from ordinary people. From his pupils, There were lines of golden lines, just like the eyes of a cat. They were unbelievably bright. The strands of hair in front of his forehead were neatly trimmed. They just happened to follow his movements of lowering his eyes, blocking them and covering his eyes. Xiaohei, come back. No one heard her order, other than the devil dog that wanted to tear the little fatty into pieces with its claws. The rest of the people could not see anything. The little one reached out and touched the devil dog's leg. Her small body could only reach the dog's thigh. I can't let someone die when I just came to school. Besides, school is quite boring. It's not bad to have a toy like this. As she said that, Helian Qingchen smiled faintly with a unique arc. The little radishes were very cute. After the first class, all of them rested on the small desks. Helian Qingchen was also sleeping. Her tender little face was extremely cute. Soon a little girl came to give him candy. She also wanted to wait with him for the adults to come and pick him up after school. Little Fatty Chung was very unhappy. After class, he gathered a few of his friends and surrounded Helian Qingchen. Country bumpkin, I'm warning you. You better listen to me and call me boss. Otherwise, I'll make sure you don't get away scot-free. Little Fatty Chung was the oldest among them. When he spoke, he mimicked the tone of an adult. Helian Qingchen stared at the lollipop that was dropped by her feet. Beauty Wei Wei only allowed him to eat candy once a week, so that he would not have worms in his teeth. This piece of candy was so hard to come by, but it was gone just like that. Good, very good. Helian Qingchen looked at little Fatty Chung. Her canine teeth gradually revealed, as if something was gathering in his eyes. At this moment, the teacher walked in from the door. She clapped her hands and said in a cute voice, "All right, children, it's almost time for lunch. Hurry up and line up. It's time to eat." Helian Qingchen immediately regained his senses. He could not cause trouble in school. If he wanted to teach someone a lesson, he had to wait until they were outside the school gate. Otherwise, Beauty Wei Wei would find out. Then, he would lose more than he gained. Thinking of this, Helian Qingchen retracted his aura. Holding his small rice bowl, he walked towards the group with a chuckle. He was the smallest and shortest, so he would definitely be at the front of the line. Little Fatty Chung looked at him and thought that he had completely frightened him. He was very pleased with himself. During lunch, he ate 3 big bowls of rice in a row. Just as Helian Qingchen was eating in a daze, a pure black Lamborghini sports car arrogantly stopped at the entrance of the kindergarten. Chapter 872. A butler in a black uniform respectfully opened the back door. A small and cool figure slowly walked out of the sports car. This made the teachers, who had stopped and were walking over, suck in a deep breath. The little boy was wearing a leather jacket with a cap on his head, covering half of his face. He even wore sunglasses on his face, as if he didn't like the sun. But even so, people could clearly see his appearance. He was as white as snow, and his black hair fell from the hood to the side of his ears. It was very smooth and dark. His slender and beautiful little fingers moved back and forth a few times as he casually looked around. His eyes moved back and forth on the passers-by, focusing on their body shape and fat thickness. It looks delicious. The little boy stood beside the car, tilting his head slightly and smiling. It was a very ordinary action, but when he did it, there was an indescribable evil, as if some kind of dark aura was overflowing from his ruby-like eyes. The passing teachers didn't know what he said, but they were surprised that there was such a cool little boy in the world. It was as if he had walked out of a manga, and they couldn't help but look back. The little boy was used to being looked at since he was young, so he wasn't sensitive to such gazes at all. When he saw that someone was looking at him, he even looked at the shadows of the kindergarten. He looked up and down, and stuck out his tongue to lick his thin lips. To be honest, he looked like a flashy little rich second generation. The little black shadow in the shadows didn't take him seriously, but what he didn't know was that after Bailey Shangxia licked his thin lips, he softly spat out 2 words. "I want to eat." The little black shadow wanted to scare him like he did others, so when Bailey Shangxia approached him, he had already reached out his black fingernails, ready to pinch him. However, he never would have thought that the seemingly harmless little rich kid would release an evil aura that he had never felt before in the next moment. He wanted to run, But it was too late. He was eaten in one bite. After the little rich second generation finished his dessert, he put his sunglasses back on his face and said domineeringly, "This time, Father is sure that Mother is in this space-time. And in the East?" "Yes, Your Highness." When the butler in black lowered his eyes, the tip of his tongue was diamond-shaped. "This is already the 8th kindergarten that Little Highness has entered. His Highness has instructed that if Little Highness is expelled this time, he will strip you naked and hang you in both the human and demon realms for a human body aesthetic exhibition." The little rich second generation sneered and lifted the small school bag on his shoulder. He sneered heavily and didn't say anything. The butler in black became nervous and said into the Bluetooth headset in his ear, "What should we do if His Highness catches a cold? To get an injection?" But every time the Little Highness had an injection, it would frighten the nurses. "Tell His Highness, yes. We must inform His Highness." The corner of the little rich kid's mouth twitched, and his voice was very cool. "I just sneezed. That's enough. Go back to where you came from. Don't disturb me when I go to school to recruit underlings." Demons were born with the desire to control power. This was even more so for the little rich second generation. He had never put anyone in his eyes. If his father hadn't told him that his mother didn't like them killing humans, he would have eaten these people's souls long ago. The little rich second generation put his hands in his pockets, and the corners of his mouth always carried a smile. It was just that that smile was too bloodthirsty. Those who didn't know him would only think of him as a little angel. In fact, his appearance had already made the demons in a radius of dozens of miles feel a strong sense of uneasiness. The little rich second generation had already forgotten that he was in his mother's belly. However, in his memory, there was always a pair of gentle hands that would caress her belly from time to time. At that time, he would always be with what he couldn't remember, but the little rich second generation knew that it was a very, very happy feeling. Therefore, even he wanted to find his mother as soon as possible. However, he was different from his father. Besides his mother, he had other interests, and that was to make his peers fear him. Humans were just toys to be played with. They were greedy, timid, and vain. They would always revere those who were richer and more powerful than them. Just like his father said, if he wanted to call the wind and summon the rain in this era, he must first successfully disguise himself as a human, and then stand at the top of the pyramid. The little rich second-generation kid laughed again, letting his head teacher hold his little hand as they walked into their small classroom in a very, very cool manner. "This is the new Bailey Shangxia. He just came back from abroad. In the future, when the children learn English songs, Shangxia can lead the singing." The teacher introduced, but she still couldn't hide the amazement in her eyes. In the capital, there were countless wealthy families. However, there were only a dozen or so people whom the headmaster had personally instructed, and the one she was holding was one of those dozen or so people. When the children in the classroom heard that the other party came back from abroad, they bit their little fingers and tilted their heads. A foreigner? When it came to beautiful things, children would always actively surround them. They looked at the little rich second generation adorably and innocently, wanting to be friends with him. However, there was only one person who furrowed his little brows when the little rich second generation appeared. Why was there such a strong evil aura? Could it be that he was a demon? No, if he was a demon, he would definitely be able to tell. Little Chingchen's eyes narrowed even more. Of course, the little rich second generation noticed her gaze. He looked in her direction without any reservation. His eyes were filled with a dangerous aura. From the moment he came in, he realized that there was something wrong with this human. Although he couldn't tell what was wrong with the other party, the feeling was too mysterious. The little rich second generation also narrowed his eyes. The two children were filled with hostility even before they spoke a word. This was the best news for little Fatty Chung. When he saw the clothes on the little rich second generation, he knew that the other party was rich, just like him. Little Fatty Chung had been influenced by his mother since he was young. Although he was still young, he was already subconsciously scheming against others. Therefore, after the teacher left, he took the initiative to bring the two children behind him, to stand in front of the little rich second generation heir, during the class break. Shangxia, do you also dislike that little country bumpkin? I heard my mother ask what his family does. He's a broken car mechanic and is extremely poor. Chapter 873. When Bailey Shangxia heard little Fatty Cheng's words, he raised his blood-red eyes, but did not do anything. This made little Fatty Cheng twitch his mouth. Under normal circumstances, when one heard that the other party was so poor, wouldn't one join him in scolding them? Shangxia, we have discussed and decided to join forces with you to teach that little country bumpkin a lesson. Little Fatty Cheng continued to encourage the little rich kid with all his might. After he finished speaking, he even looked at little Qingchen with disdain. Bailey Shangxia sneered. He did not look like a 3-year-old child at all. Instead, he looked like a little boss in a movie. Did I say that I would join forces with you? Get the hell out of here. You. Little Fatty Cheng was the king of children everywhere he went. Who dared to talk to him like that? Bailey Shangxia did not want to waste time with him. He hated it when people pointed at him. He grabbed little Fatty Cheng's collar and pulled him over. I will give you 2 choices now. Either you become my underling or I beat you up. This human soul was rotten from head to toe. If it was any other time, he would not even look at him. However, he still needed a human to run errands for him in kindergarten. Little Fatty Cheng chuckled. Be your little brother? He thought to himself, look at my body. I can beat 3 of you. You want me to be your underling? There was no room for discussion. Little Fatty Cheng twisted his body and was about to grab Bailey Shangxia's hair and elbow him in the stomach. Children did not have any rules when they fought. Little Fatty Cheng relied on his fat, strong, and powerful family. Therefore, he did not think too much when he bullied others. He was very ruthless. But what he didn't expect was that before his hand could even touch the corner of the little rich kid's shirt, he was pushed away by the other party and fell heavily to the ground. Little Fatty Cheng was dizzy from the fall. His eyes were filled with stars. However, that person did not stop. He stepped on his stomach with his short legs and said in a cold voice, Do you think you are fit to fight with me? Little Fatty Cheng was in so much pain that he burst out crying. When the class teacher rushed to the classroom, she saw this scene. Her small face turned pale in an instant. She quickly reached out and pulled little Fatty Cheng up. She actually wanted to hug him, but little Fatty Cheng's body was too big. She could only half hug and half drag him. Little Fatty Cheng cried even more heartbreakingly because the adults were around. Teacher Shangxia, he hit me. The head teacher patted his back and coaxed him for a long time. Then, she turned around and said to Bailey Shangxia, Shangxia, how can you hit him? Teacher. Bailey Shangxia smiled at little Fatty Cheng. His eyes were filled with a dangerous light. Student Cheng was the one who started it. I was just defending myself. When the homeroom teacher heard that the child even said that it was a real defense, and then looked at the 2 children's figures, she didn't know what to say. After all, little Fatty Cheng was too big and burly. With such a figure and appearance, it was obvious that he often bullied others. No matter what, children should still be peaceful with each other. You can't fight. The homeroom teacher wanted them to shake hands and make peace. However, little Fatty Cheng burst into tears. Teacher, if you don't care about him, I will definitely tell my dad. Someone hit me in school, and you didn't even do anything about it. I will ask my dad to remove you from your position. The homeroom teacher was teaching the class for the 2nd year. Although she wasn't very righteous, she was at least a kind person. When she heard that this child was using his parents to pressure her, her face turned serious. Then go and tell your dad, and ask him to remove me from my position. Little Fatty Cheng was dumbfounded. He thought that by saying this, the other party would definitely know the severity of the matter. He didn't expect that it was useless. He was stunned for a while before he burst into tears again. The homeroom teacher didn't really want to be angry with a child. She couldn't let him continue crying like this, so she called his parents to pick him up. During the 3rd lesson, little Fatty Cheng was completely obedient. He didn't dare to look at Bailey Shangxia. Whenever he looked at him, he would feel a terrible stomachache. Little young Master Cheng had never been so aggrieved. He was originally the king of the children in the class. However, when Bailey Shangxia came, he was nothing. Not only that, He was beaten up, but the teacher didn't even punish him. Most importantly, fucking hell. What did legitimate self-defense mean? Little Fatty Cheng's IQ couldn't keep up with Bailey Shangxia. However, it didn't mean that the other children couldn't keep up with him. Little Qingchen, for example, sat in front of his little desk, biting on the lollipop in his mouth, and watching this scene silently. Then, he obediently took out the chocolate cake that Beauty Weiwei had prepared for him. If he remembered correctly, legitimate self-defense wasn't an idiom that a 3-year-old child should learn. It seemed that the other party wasn't a low-level monster. He should have perfectly integrated into human life. Beauty Weiwei said that this kind of monster was the most difficult to deal with, because it was uncertain whether the other party simply wanted to live as a human or did something bad. No matter what, as long as the other party didn't provoke him, he wouldn't make a move. But for some reason, he always felt that the other party wasn't a monster. Demons always had a pungent smell on them. But this person, other than looking very rich, was no different from an ordinary human. Moreover, the small leather jacket he was wearing looked very good. It was the one that little Qingchen had always wanted. Little Black, can you see the other party's real body? Little Qingchen asked in a low voice, wanting to summon the devil dog. However, something strange happened. Little Black didn't appear. This had never happened before. Little Qingchen's eyes darkened as he looked at Bailey Shangxia. His little face became serious as he ate the chocolate cake. He looked adorable no matter how one looked at him. Bailey Shangxia, this little devil, had a secret that no one knew, and that was that he liked to eat chocolate very, very much. Under normal circumstances, he was very disdainful of humans. But when it came to eating, he had to admit that humans were very good at making things. They could even make such delicious food like chocolate. No matter how cool Bailey Shangxia was, he was still just a child. When little Qingchen took out the chocolate cake, his blood-red eyes kept looking to the side. Little Qingchen, of course, sensed the other party's gaze. Without a word, he hugged his chocolate cake even tighter and ate it spoonful by spoonful, exuding an air of nobility. Bailey Shangxia felt that this human didn't know what to do at all. His eyes narrowed, and he made up his mind to accept the other party as his little brother. Even if it was for the chocolate cake, he would beat the other party into submission. Chapter 874. However, before Bailey Shangxia could make a move, little Fatty Cheng, who was standing at the side, had a devious idea. He thought that even if he couldn't defeat the foreign Bailey Shangxia, he couldn't possibly lose to that country bumpkin. Coincidentally, he still had some pent-up anger to vent. He wanted to vent his anger before his mother came to pick him up. Little Fatty Cheng was a classic example of someone who bullied the weak, but feared the strong. Without hesitation, he wiped the corners of his mouth and walked toward little Qingchen with a fierce look on his face. He looked like he wanted to snatch the cake. The children in class 1 stared at the scene with wide eyes. They thought that Qingchen was definitely done for. Little Fatty Cheng was the most brutal and unreasonable person. Once he bumped into her, she might even fall over, let alone the cake. However, no one expected that little Qingchen, who was eating the chocolate cake, would suddenly stand up. With a small fork in her hand, she gave a side kick. A loud bang was heard. The big meatball, little Fatty Cheng, was sent flying more than a meter away by the wind from the kick. That kind of strength and ruthlessness made Bailey Shangxia, who was standing at the side, raise his eyebrows in surprise. However, he still had a cool look on his face. On the other hand, the surrounding children were all stunned. Qingchen, have you learned Taekwondo before? That kick was so cool. Is that how you kick? Ha! No, that's not how Qingchen kicked just now. Class 1 was completely lively. They crowded in the center and looked at little Qingchen with eyes full of admiration. If one were to describe the feeling, it would be as if they were treating little Qingchen as an amazing cartoon character, such as Pleasant Goat. Little Fatty Cheng, who was lying on the ground, felt his internal organs hurting badly. This time, he cried even more miserably. After all, little Fatty Cheng was a child who cared about his reputation. It was still acceptable that he was beaten up by Bailey Shangxia, who had just returned from abroad. He couldn't tolerate being beaten up by a country bumpkin. If others knew about this, how could he survive in the kindergarten? The more he thought about it, the louder little Fatty Chung cried. Almost everyone in the corridor could hear him. The form teacher was still explaining the situation to Madam Chung. When they heard the commotion in the classroom, the two of them looked at each other and hurriedly ran in. When Madam Chung saw little Fatty Chung sprawled on the ground, her face immediately turned green. Who the hell would do this? When had her son ever suffered like this? Rich Lady Chung was both angry and angry. She patted little Fatty Chung on the back and said to the homeroom teacher, "Teacher Zhang, you have to give me an explanation. My son is here to study. He was not here to be bullied. I never expected you, a teacher with such little experience, to be able to teach my son well. I only wanted you to take good care of my son. But look at my son's face. If anything happens to my son, don't even think about being a teacher anymore." The homeroom teacher of Class 1 did not expect that little Fatty Chung would be beaten up again, while she was out for a short while. To be honest, she was also having a headache. It was only the first day of school, and there were already 2 fights. Moreover, little Fatty did not look like someone who could be beaten up so easily. It was strange. Why was he always the one who got injured? Teacher Zhang's expression did not look too good after being angered. She turned around and scolded the children of Class 1. Who did it? She originally thought that it was Bailey Shangxia who beat him up, and was about to walk up to him to grab him. Unexpectedly, little Qingchen, who was sitting beside the small wooden table, stood up with his chocolate cake in his hand. He looked at their homeroom teacher with his round eyes. He was still wearing his little white shirt, and looked adorably silly. "Teacher, I did it." Teacher Zhang paused. "You?" "Yes." Little Qingchen nodded. Beside her, upper-class Lady Qing shouted, "Teacher Zhang, since the culprit has been found, I hope that you can quickly solve this matter for me." Of course, she recognized little Qingchen's face. He was Helian Vivian's son. Teacher Zhang pressed her head and said to the upper-class lady, "Madam Chung, please calm down first. I have to ask the child the reason for the fight." "What reason would a poor child have to fight?" "It must be because he was jealous of my son." Upper-class Lady Qing sneered. "He beat my son up to this extent. This kind of student shouldn't be accepted by your kindergarten." Teacher Zhang was at a loss for words after hearing upper-class Lady Cheng's words. Her tone towards little Qingchen also became unpleasant. "Why did you fight?" "Legitimate self-defense." Little Qingchen did not even blink when he said that. Since he was still holding the chocolate cake in his little hands, he looked harmless no matter how one looked at him. But why was it legitimate self-defense again? Teacher Zhang was momentarily at a loss for words. Did children these days know so much? Or were they led astray by Bailey Shangxia who came back from abroad? Thinking of this, Teacher Zhang couldn't help but look in the direction of Bailey Shangxia. That child was very cool. He looked at everyone as if he was condescending. However, at this moment, he was looking at little Qingchen with a smile that seemed a little evil. Little Fatty Chung felt a toothache when he heard the words legitimate self-defense. "Mom, what is legitimate self-defense?" "I don't care. It's this country bumpkin's fault for hitting me. Help me teach him a lesson. Get the school to expel him." Little Fatty Chung cried and wailed as the fat on his face shook. Upper-class Lady Chung felt sorry for her son. She quickly agreed. Okay. Let's go to the principal's office now." When Teacher Zhang heard that they were going to look for the principal, she quickly persuaded. "Madam Chung, the children are still young. It's inevitable that they will bump into each other. There's no need to make such a big fuss, right?" "What do you mean by making a fuss?" "Am I making a fuss?" Upper-class Lady Qing asked in return. She tried to calm herself down. "Teacher Zhang, I have always known that my son has many problems. He may look very domineering, but our family has its own upbringing. He is definitely not a child who will stir up trouble. He is even very kind. However, this is not a reason for him to be bullied." Teacher Zhang felt awkward when she heard this. She really didn't know what to say. At this moment, little Qingchen spoke. "Madam, is your family's upbringing to let your son snatch other people's cake?" "I just said that I was acting in self-defense. If he hadn't snatched my favorite chocolate, I wouldn't have sent him flying with a kick." Chapter 875. Bailey Shangxia kept nodding as he listened. That's right. If it wasn't for my son wanting to snatch that piece of chocolate cake, now that piece of cake would have been mine. Needless to say, our Debeo was also eyeing that piece of chocolate cake. Helian Qingchen did not understand either. Why was that non-human fellow nodding his head continuously when he was talking? He looked at the other party with a very strange expression. And because of Helian Qingchen's words, the atmosphere in the classroom had an obvious change. Madame Cheng's face in particular looked as if she had been punched hard. She had never thought that her son would be beaten up for this reason. Madame Cheng understood her son's nature. In the past, he had often snatched other children's things, but Madame Cheng had never taken this matter to heart. They were just children, so what was wrong with snatching things? Anyway, their family had plenty of money. They could just give the other party some benefits. Besides, her son didn't have a bad heart. He was usually very willing to help others. Therefore, Madame Cheng had never suffered in this aspect. Now that it was pointed out by a child in such a childish voice, her face burned. Especially that sentence. Madam, is your family's upbringing to allow your son to snatch other people's cakes? Made her feel ashamed. Faced with the gazes of the other children, Madame Cheng smiled stiffly and said to the form teacher, "Look at this child, he's quite eloquent. He doesn't seem like a 3-year-old at all. No matter what, it's my son who is greedy and thinks that other people's cakes are good. In fact, he has eaten all kinds of cakes. He wants to be close to others, but he doesn't know how to express it. Since it's a misunderstanding, I won't pursue this matter. My son's face still needs to be smeared with ointment when we go back." The form teacher also knew Madame Cheng's identity and didn't want this matter to continue, so he smiled as well. But little Fatty Cheng couldn't accept it. "Mom, I've already been beaten up to this extent. Why won't you pursue this matter? Bailey Shangxia was the one who beat me. I didn't snatch his things. He beat me until my teeth hurt." When Madame Cheng heard this, she was angry. So it wasn't just one person who beat her son? "Teacher Zhang, how do you explain this matter?" The form teacher really couldn't handle it, so he simply said to Bailey Shangxia, "Shangxia, tell us the reason why you beat him up." Teacher Little Zhang felt that this child would definitely be able to say something like Helian Qingchen, so that Madame Cheng would leave quickly. But it turned out that Teacher Zhang didn't understand Bailey Shangxia's personality. He was to say he didn't like to say. "There's no reason, I just didn't like him." Teacher Little Zhang. What happened to self-defense? Madame Cheng had never seen such an arrogant child before. She was so angry that her hands were trembling. Her voice also became extremely sharp and ear-piercing. "Just you wait. Sunt. Let's go to the principal." Bailey Shangxia didn't care. He couldn't even be bothered to look at his wife's face. His eyes were fixed on the chocolate cake in Helian Qingchen's hands. That was his target. Little Qingchen was silent from the beginning to the end. But in her heart, she was thinking of telling Beauty Weiwei when she got home today. The chocolate cake she made smelled so good that someone was peeking at it from the beginning to the end. Achoo! Helian Vivian, who was basking in the sun beside the BMW Tomahawk, sneezed without warning. Then she raised her eyebrows. Who was talking about her again? Under the sun, the man in a suit was standing beside her and talking to the American wearing sunglasses. His expression was serious throughout the whole process. The rest of the rough men changed their clothes one by one. "No, this looks too much like a gangster's. Little boss will be criticized by the children in school. Oh, you can't bring a gun there. That's a controlled product. If it's found out, you still have to use your connections. You can just play with it and disassemble it yourself. Don't lead little boss astray. Also, what car are we driving?" When Big Boss sent Little Boss to school, she was riding a BMW Tomahawk. "We have to be better than her. We can't be inferior. It doesn't matter what car we drive. What's important is that you see if I'm kind enough now." If they were going to kindergarten, they had to dress up nicely. Otherwise, under normal circumstances, with their looks, they would either scare the children or be treated as a bear by the children. No matter which one it was, it would make Little Boss lose face. They had to show off their absolute arrogance and win glory in front of Little Boss. Helian Vivian originally planned to sleep, After all, she was working at night now. During the day, she was too lazy to lift her hands. However, when she saw the group of brothers chattering nonstop, she felt that it was quite interesting. The man in a suit who was in charge of the discussion finally finished. He finished the last sip of his coffee and pushed a small leather box in his hand over. In the box there were stacks of US dollars. The American took the box and left the car dealership after saying that it was a pleasure to work with them. The man in a suit turned his head and said to Hellion Vivian, "Big boss, we just received news that a powerful force is looking for us. They should have arrived in the capital by now. However, our network of connections is not bad. They won't be able to find us in a short time." "Yes, I have ears. I heard it." Hellion Vivian casually threw the helmet in her left hand away. The corner of her mouth curled into an evil smile. "Contact Tang sect. First, investigate the other party's background." The man in a suit had the same idea. There was nothing in the world that Tang sect couldn't find out. Who asked them to have the world's most powerful hacker, young Master Tang? "Oh right. Qingshan said that today is his first day of school. He wants to learn to live independently. So after school, he will come back by himself. He asked us not to pick him up," Hellion Vivian said as she lazily yawned. The few rough men who were still dressing up suddenly stopped what they were doing. They turned their heads in unison, with a look of despair on their faces. Their beautiful dream of picking up little boss from school was shattered just like that. Oh no, it couldn't be any crueler. Boring. Why did I start dressing up in the morning? Jean, you're not the worst. The worst is that bear old A. He kept practicing how to smile in front of the mirror, so that he wouldn't look like a bad guy. It's quite tough for him. The 198-meter tall rough man old A. It was really noisy. Suddenly, a gentle voice sounded in the air. I want to ask if we can catch ghosts here." Chapter 876. The burly men paused for a moment and couldn't help but look behind them. Their eyes were filled with vigilance. Hellion Vivian was very direct. Her lips curled into a smile. "Miss, this is a car dealership, not a ghost-catching shop. Did you come to the wrong place? The ghost-catching shop is on the street next door." According to the rules of the underworld, she usually took on business at night. Absolutely no one would come to her during the day. I heard someone say that this place can help you catch ghosts." The man was wearing a gray robe that was stained with grease. He looked at Hellion Weiwei eagerly and said, "That man's surname is Tang. He said that as long as I come here, someone will help me." "Young Master Tang?" Hellion Vivian's expression changed slightly. She looked at the woman and asked, "Did he give you anything?" Something?" The woman seemed to remember something. He said, "When I get there, I'll give you the phone." The woman took out the phone that was not worth much from her pocket. As soon as Hellion Weiwei took it, the originally dim screen changed. A silver fox mask suddenly rose up and gradually transformed into a string of words. Not too many, not too few, only 7 words. "This case is yours." The burly men were already used to young Master Tang's ability to hack into any electronic system. The woman who came to Hellion Vivian didn't expect her phone to have such a function. She covered her mouth and widened her eyes. What is that?" "Mission card." Hellion Weiwei chuckled softly and returned the card in her palm to her. The woman took it and studied it for a long time. However, the image was gone. Where did it go? Hellion Vivian didn't answer her. Tang Sec's secret orders were directly issued by young Master Tang. Every time, the method was unexpected. The more it was like this, the more protective it was of them. "Tell me, what did you encounter?" Hellion Weiwei casually crossed her long legs to the side. Her smiling appearance could easily make people let down their guard. The woman's eyes immediately overflowed with tears. Her crying voice was somewhat desperate. "My son is missing. I can't find him no matter how hard I try. Did you call the police?" Hellion Vivian asked in a low voice. The woman clenched her fists. "Less than 24 hours. The police said they won't accept it." That is indeed the case. This was also the reason why more and more children had gone missing in recent years. To be honest, 24 hours was too late. However, How can you be sure that your son's disappearance is related to ghosts? This was what Hellion Vivian really wanted to ask. The woman looked around and said, "It's not just my son. When the kindergarten started this year, one child disappeared every 2 days. Moreover, it was only in the afternoon when school was over, because the children didn't go missing for long, and the school insisted that they were picked up by relatives. But I know my son. He would never leave with someone he doesn't know." Kindergarten big class. Hellion Weiwei raised her eyes. "Is it the kindergarten in our district?" The woman nodded heavily. "I told others that there was something wrong with that kindergarten, but no one believed me. But it's really not right. There's nothing wrong with the kindergarten." Hellion Vivian calmly interrupted her, but her brows were furrowed. She looked like she was thinking about something. The woman bit her thin lips. "Even you don't believe me? It's not that I don't believe you. I've been to that kindergarten." Hellion Vivian paused and said, "My son goes to school there too. He just reported in today. There's nothing wrong with the kindergarten. The most important thing is, who took your son away? But with these conditions, we can't be sure that it's related to ghosts." The woman heard Hellion Vivian's words and hesitated. She wanted to say something but stopped. Hellion Vivian smiled and continued, "If you don't tell me everything you know, it will only drag on. The possibility of saving your son will become very small." Actually, the woman couldn't stop crying as she spoke. "More than a month ago, something was wrong with my son. I think you can see it too. Our family's conditions aren't good. His father is an ordinary construction worker. I set up a ramen stall myself. In the afternoon, there were many people eating noodles, so I often went to pick him up very late. At that time, he told me that he always felt that someone was following him. At first, I thought that he was just imagining things. Later he stopped saying that, so I didn't take it to heart. But a few days before the child went missing, he was clearly alone, but he seemed to be talking to someone in his bedroom. When I asked him, he said that it was a little brother playing with him. There was no little brother in the room. After I heard that, I was very scared, so I went to the great immortal to ask for a talisman. Later, my son finally returned to normal, but he was gone." Hellion Vivian heard her words and looked behind her. She chuckled and said, "Besides your son, did you and your husband have another child?" The woman suddenly froze. How did you know?" "I calculated." Hellion Vivian looked at the little shadow behind her. "He died in a car accident, right?" When the woman heard this, she almost burst into tears. She could only nod. Ghosts were not supposed to be known to ordinary people. But Hellion Weiwei still told the woman the truth in a roundabout way. "Your son did see a little brother, but that little brother didn't come to hurt him. Instead, it was a natural connection between brothers. He sensed danger and wanted to protect the other party, but his strength was too weak, and he couldn't resist the Chinese talisman. So he left the place where he was protecting the other party. If I'm not wrong, after he left, your son was taken away by someone else." Hearing this, the woman seemed to have understood everything. Tears streamed down her face. I thought he was angry with me and his father for giving all our love to Xiaoxiang. That's why he kept pestering Xiaoxiang. Children have always been simple and pure. Whatever you give them, they will give in return. Even if their parents are biased, blood ties are also present at birth." Hellion Weiwei stood up, the light in her eyes slightly heavy, as she looked at the setting sun not far away. After that, she turned her head and faced the group of rough men and smiled evilly. "Someone is causing trouble in our territory. Aren't they looking down on me too much?" Jean, who had a cigarette in his mouth, did not speak. He silently pulled the leather jacket over. Old A, who looked like a big bear, grinned, raised the steel pipe in his hand and said, "Get him." Chapter 877. It's a must, but first we have to go to the ghost city to take a look. Since it's a task handed over by young Master Tang, it shouldn't be that simple. As Hellion Vivian spoke, she straddled her BMW tomahawk. Her slender fingers pressed down on the helmet, and her eyes looked at the woman. "Your son went missing at the school gate, right?" The woman wiped her tears and said, "That's what the school teacher said." "I see. You go back first." I'll let you know when there's news. After Hellion Vivian asked clearly, she exerted force in her hand, and the tomahawk rushed out of the street, heading in the direction of the ghost city. The so-called ghost city first appeared in the old Beijing city. It was a kind of antique market that opened in the middle of the night to the wee hours of the morning. It usually bought and sold some items that couldn't see the light of day. For example, the possessions of fallen princes, the treasures stolen from the palace by great eunuchs, or the funerary objects obtained from the hands of grave robbers. The sellers set up stalls in the wilderness. If the buyer and the seller were interested, they would make a price in their sleeves without saying a word. The whole market was silent and dark, so it was called the Ghost City. Later, the new China was established, and after experiencing a cultural catastrophe, more and more antiques were scattered among the people. This kind of ghost city naturally began to become popular. For example, Beijing's Panjiayuan and Tianjin's Target Street were examples. However, the current ghost city's opening time was no longer in the middle of the night, but in the early hours of Saturday. When the sky just turned bright, people would come out to set up stalls. Gradually, the antique market was formed. Very few young people knew that there was such a place in the imperial capital. Only the old Beijing people would understand. But Hellion Vivian was the only one who rode a tomahawk to the antique market in the morning. Other people always had the appearance of a master, either holding a fan in their hand or playing with a walnut. It was now afternoon, approaching dusk, and it was Monday. There were only a few people in Panjiayuan. Otherwise, they would have to stare at Hellion Vivian. Since they came to the ghost city, they naturally had to go through the ghost city's route. He took out a piece of paper as a knock on the door. A short while later, the unassuming wooden door in the old alley opened. A young man walked out from inside, holding a tortoise in his hand. After seeing Hellion Weiwei, he raised his eyebrows. You are? If the king of hell wants someone dead at midnight, he won't let them live until midnight. Hellion Vivian walked in with her long legs and said, I'm here to check something. When the young man heard the slogan, he saw her holding a piece of paper in her hand and holding the turtle to pick it up. Every trade had its own rules. Only when the tortoise recognized the underworld money could the business be considered accepted. On the other hand, the young man hadn't heard this slogan for a long time. He thought that his master was bluffing him, so he couldn't help but look at Hellion Vivian a few more times. Hellion Vivian smiled the whole time. As soon as she entered the room, she hit the back of the head of the man sitting in the middle of the alley, who was pretending to be a master. Monkey, that's enough. Don't pretend anymore. Take off your sunglasses. You really think you're blind? When Monkey heard this voice, he immediately cried out, Boss, my mother. Why are you here? Of course, I'm here to check something. Hellion Vivian took his sunglasses and looked at them. It's a famous brand. You're doing well. Monkey chuckled. Isn't it because people nowadays believe in blind people touching bones? I'm just pretending. The young man seemed to have never seen his master like this. He was completely dumbfounded and stared blankly. Monkey reminded him, Hey, what are you doing? Go and get a drink. Open your master's bottle of Lafite. Boss loves to drink red wine the most. All right, I'm not drinking today. Hellion Vivian put down his sunglasses. Chinchin is going to school, you know that, right? Monkey's face was solemn. I have to know about little boss. Boss, let me tell you, old A and the rest can stop being so insidious. I said that I was going to send little boss to school, but they refused. They even said that if I were to go, the children in school would definitely think that little boss is a cheat. How do I look like a cheat? You don't look like one. You are clearly one, Hellion Vivian said with a smile. Monkey was instantly speechless. After a while he said, Even if I'm a cheat, I'm a high-level cheat. Humph. I remember you saying that you are very familiar with the principal of Chinchin's kindergarten. Hellion Vivian's thin lips curled up. When Monkey heard this, his eyes lit up. Boss. Could it be that little boss had encountered some difficulties in school? I'll get someone to settle it now. In 2 words, deal with him. Hellion Vivian. Her group of brothers, really. Even the way they speak is the same. Seeing that Hellion Vivian didn't object, Monkey still muttered. What did I say? I said that it's best if I send little boss to school. When their principal sees me, it's as if he's worshipping Guanyin Bodhisattva. Little boss won't be at a disadvantage there, right? Not letting you go is Qingchen's idea. Hellion Vivian raised an eyebrow. If you insist on doing it, I won't stop you. Monkey was completely silent this time. Little boss's idea, then forget it. I'll just stay here obediently. He couldn't let little boss hate him. He had to show more face in front of little boss and win his favor. Good boy. Hellion Vivian held back her laughter and patted the other party's head. Since you're familiar, then it's easy. Their kindergarten hasn't been very peaceful recently. Help me hack into their system. I want to see the surveillance camera at the school gate. Not very peaceful. Monkey frowned and pulled open the bookshelf at the side. Behind the bookshelf were 4 computers, the brand of which was the most high-end, Alien. These 4 computers all used virtual IPs. Not only that, there were also several routers in the room, all for the sake of getting rid of tracking. Of course, the better the hacker, the faster the speed. There was no need for too much concealment, because when he hacked in, he would sweep away all the traces he left behind, such as young Master Tang. Monkey was also from the Tang sect. He was in charge of this area. Once the main computer was turned on, the 4 computers ran at the same time. He sat in front of the computer, his fingers quickly typing on the keyboard. For some unknown reason, the computer screen suddenly turned black. Various English codes kept appearing on it, finally stopping on a teacher's office page. Found it. Monkey stared at the screen. This should be very fast. Use the chat software to hack in, then enter the school network, finally confirm. Chapter 878. Pa. The crisp sound of the keyboard rang out. As soon as Monkey finished speaking, the images on the 4 screens immediately changed, showing the scene at the entrance of the kindergarten. This is today's video. Monkey's fingers were still on the keyboard. In order to allow Hellion Vivian to better observe, he divided each image into 4 parts. Hellion Vivian originally wanted him to directly switch to the day the child went missing, but after seeing this morning's video, she suddenly paused. Wait a minute. Why isn't the video from 9 a.m.? The video from 9 a.m.? Monkey frowned and switched back the video, his eyes widening. It's really not there. The time on the video has disappeared by 5 minutes. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes. 9 a.m., which was the video that appeared after she sent her son to school. Thinking of this, she moved the mouse twice and finally fixed it on a Lamborghini sports car. Her eyes were filled with coldness. The video disappeared after this carriage appeared. Later, check the owner of this car. Okay. Monkey was very fast. Hellion Vivian didn't stop thinking. Now switch the time. Look at the time when the kindergarten ended yesterday. It should be around 5:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Monkey followed Hellion Vivian's instructions and pressed a few buttons on the keyboard. The strange thing happened again. This time the time didn't jump. Instead, the video completely turned white. It was as if there was a malfunction in the video, causing it to crackle. What's going on? It's so strange, Monkey said as he frowned. At this moment, Hellion Weiwei's eyes darkened. Someone is targeting this kindergarten. It wasn't a ghost. She didn't feel any evil aura. Instead, it was the scene from this morning that seemed more like something was wrong. Since it wasn't a ghost, it was man-made. From Hellion Vivian's experience, man-made situations were usually more troublesome than ghosts. However, the culprit's target was too strange. Logically speaking, if someone wanted to kidnap a child, they would definitely choose someone rich. The kindergartens in this area were all for elites. Many children of high officials and nobles would be sent there. It was clear at a glance that the family conditions of the clients, who came to see her today, were not very rich. Then why did the other party kidnap a child from such a family? Unless the other party wasn't looking for a ransom. It seemed that the other party was very smart. The imperial capital was different from other places. Kidnapping and extorting in such a city was undoubtedly asking for trouble. Since it was not for the ransom, there was only one other possibility: child trafficking. According to the crime statistics, child trafficking in China had reached a peak. Under normal circumstances, missing children were usually between 1.5 years old to 4.5 years old. This was because children at this age did not have complete memories and were easy to control and carry away. Even if they cried, it would not attract the attention of others, because everyone would think that the child was throwing a tantrum and would not think of the problem from the perspective of abduction. Monkey continued to attack the opponent's network. Check the school's documents and see if these missing children are between the ages of 1.5 to 4.5 years old. Helian Weiwei quickly cut to the chase. Monkey was not idle. His fingers quickly scrolled down. That's right. The oldest is only 4 years old. Most of them are 3 years old. As expected, this was an organized and premeditated abduction. It was very unusual. Helian Vivian was so sure because of the other party's speed of abduction and the use of high-tech hacking to erase evidence of the crime. Moreover, they were very clear about the time when the police were dispatched. For a mature criminal organization, 24 hours was more than enough time to transfer the child to any place. After all, children at this age did not need an identity card to enter the high-speed rail. The imperial capital was a place where transportation were located. It was too easy to transfer them. Helian Weiwei quickly realized how tricky this case was. Since it was handed to her by young Master Tang, the same situation must have happened to other kindergartens as well. The Tang sect was loyal to the Wuxia Empire. Every generation of people had to join the army. In many cases, the Tang sect would secretly solve problems that people did not realize. This time it should be the same. With this thought in mind, Helian Vivian asked Monkey to hack into the other kindergartens. Sure enough, the same situation happened in all the kindergartens in the district. However, because the matter had not spread, people did not realize the connection between the two. The other party's targets were children from poor families. It was inevitable that there would be times when such children would not be seen by their parents. For example, when they were late to pick them up, even if there was an abduction, it would not be dealt with immediately. This was because the other party did not have the ability to override other forces. But where were they going to sell so many children at once? While Helian Vivian was deep in thought, it was time for the children in the kindergartens in the other district to be released from school. Bailey Shangxia was still thinking about how to beat little Qingchen into submission and take her as his follower. So as soon as school was out, he followed behind little Qingchen coolly. Little Qingchen was still holding half of the chocolate cake in his hand. He was carrying a small school bag on his back. He planned to eat it while walking. In the past, at this time, the devil dog would show up majestically. Today, Little Black did not appear. Instead, it was replaced by a guy who was not human. Little Qingchen turned around and looked at Bailey Shangxia. Bailey Shangxia immediately raised his eyebrows. Evil and bloodthirsty. Little Qingchen immediately made up her mind to let him follow her. When they reached the car dealership, she would catch him and bring him to Beauty Vivian. She would see that there were still good-looking monsters in this world. If possible, she would like to raise one. Thinking of this, little Qingchen looked behind her again. Her little face was full of seriousness. She would raise him. He could fight, and he had the same function as Little Black. Our crazy and cool Debeo did not know what the other party was thinking. Anyway, his idea was the same from beginning to end. Beat the other party, make the other party be his follower, and steal the other party's chocolate cake. The two little people walked one after the other. Each had their own thoughts, waiting to see who would make the first move. Little Qingchen was still a little shaky when she walked, but Bailey Shangxia was different. From beginning to end, he was noble and had the unique elegance of a demon. However, compared to his father, he had more of a dark demon aura. At this time, a man in a navy blue shirt looked left and right. While little Qingchen was looking back, he came to her side. Chapter 879. He didn't know how fast and vigilant little Qingchen was. He also didn't know that little Qingchen had noticed him as soon as he left the school gate. However, little Qingchen didn't take him seriously. Compared to this man, he was more concerned about whether his chocolate cake would be snatched away by that inhuman guy. At the school gate, the man naturally wouldn't be too obvious. Moreover, he wasn't acting alone. There was a woman behind him. The woman was carrying a baby about the same age as little Qingchen. The baby was the goods they had just obtained through abduction. Although it was a little cruel to describe a child as a goods. However, in this notorious business, they called children goods. They specialized in selling and abducting women and children for a living. Their humanity had long been obliterated. The children they abducted were usually slightly older and weren't as easy to deal with as babies. Some of the sensible and smart goods would be dealt with directly. They would even be made into disabled children who could easily arouse the kindness of others. They would specialize in professional begging and never see the light of day again. Their modus operandi was also quite mature. Under normal circumstances, they would first let the goods be in a relatively quiet state. For example, the baby in their arms now. The road was bustling with people and cars, but even such a movement didn't wake him up. The baby was nestled in the woman's arms with his head tilted. He seemed to be in a deep sleep, but his closed eyes were red and swollen. The man bent down and smiled at little Qingchen. He looked very harmless. "Little friend, is there a pharmacy nearby? My child is sick. I want to sell some cold medicine." Little Qingchen glanced at him without a change in expression. The man didn't seem to expect such a reaction. He called out again, "Little friend, follow me. I'll take you there." Little Qingchen took a small spoon and took a bite of the chocolate cake before speaking slowly. The man's eyes lit up. "Then it can't be better. Thank you, friend." Children were so easy to deal with. It seemed that when there was no one around, they would be able to kidnap him. Thinking of this, the man looked back and exchanged glances with the woman who was carrying the baby. Their eyes were filled with a meaning that only they knew. There were 2 abduction missions today. Apart from the baby in the woman's arms, the other target was the child named Helian Qingchen. According to the information they received, this child came from a very ordinary single-parent family. His family owned a car repair shop. When school started, he was teased by the children, saying that he was a little poor boy. Even if such a child was lost, it would not cause any impact. When the man was thinking about these things, an obvious black fog rose from his body. That was the evil thought that came from the human heart. Such creatures were no different from evil ghosts in the eyes of demons. Bailey Shangxia watched from behind with his hands in his pockets, looking very cool. After hearing what little Qingchen said, he raised his eyebrows. His first reaction was that his chocolate cake was going to be stolen. Without saying anything, he immediately followed them domineeringly. The man smiled at little Qingchen, but his left hand was hanging by his side, as if he was holding something. Upon closer inspection, one would realize that it was a handkerchief. However, before the man could do anything, a police station appeared on the scene. A police station appeared in front of him. There was a policeman standing there, holding an electric baton in his hand. The man was not stupid. On the contrary, he was very smart, and his reaction was very quick. After seeing the police officer, he immediately realized something, and quickly threw the handkerchief away. He looked at little Qingchen with vigilance. This child was doing it on purpose. He had abducted so many children, but he had never encountered such a child who actually wanted to bite him back. At this moment, little Qingchen had already walked to the police officer's side. Her round eyes were like black gems as she pointed at the man. "There's something wrong with him." The police officer frowned and looked up at the man. The man was a bold and meticulous veteran. He was very calm and did not panic in the face of an unexpected situation. Instead, he anxiously asked the police officer, "Hello, my child has caught a cold. Where's the emergency pharmacy?" The police officer saw that he did not seem to be pretending. He then glanced at the listless child and the equally anxious woman. He did not take little Qingchen's words seriously and pointed to his left. The man immediately said, "Thank you." His grateful appearance dispelled the police officer's doubts. Little Qingchen narrowed her eyes and said in a heavy voice, "I said, there's something wrong with that man." "Little kid, uncle is very busy. Did you get lost? The school is over there. Be good and wait for your parents to come." The police officer's attitude was very good, and he was very concerned about little Qingqian. However, it was impossible for him to trust the judgment of a 3-year-old child. Moreover, a car happened to stop at this moment. The person sitting inside was Mrs. Chung, and he was familiar with the license plate number. He had to greet her, so he ignored little Qingqian. Seeing this, little Qingqian did not say anything. Instead, she carried her little cake and walked in the direction the man had left. As for Bailey Shangxia, of course, he followed the chocolate cake wherever it went. Seeing that there were fewer and fewer people, little Qingqian also stopped moving. At this moment, 2 groups of fake couples appeared behind him. The 4 people looked at him together, and one of them was the man who had asked for directions just now. He reached out and knocked away the chocolate cake in little Qingqian's hand. Then, he held a handkerchief in his hand and covered little Qingqian's mouth. Little Qingqian could avoid the follow-up actions. But now, he was completely furious. How dare they knock away the chocolate cake that Beauty Wei Wei made for him? He must make this group of people pay the price. Bailey Shangxia was also covered. He was taken away because he had the same idea as little Qingqian. However, demons were usually more violent under normal circumstances. He had been looking at half a piece of chocolate for an hour and was about to snatch it, but it was knocked away just like that. He had destroyed their nest, so he, Bailey Shangxia, would write the 4 words in reverse. When the woman saw Bailey Shangxia, she frowned heavily. This child is not in the mission. Looking at his clothes, he should be quite well-to-do. Why did you kidnap him? We can't help it. These 2 brats are very evil. They followed us all the way, and even led us to the police. You guys watch carefully. Don't let these 2 brats cause any trouble for us. Chapter 880. As the man spoke, he stuffed Bailey Shangxia and Helian Qingqian into the van. Then he followed them into the van, rolled down the window, locked the door, and drove towards the train station. Along the way, the roads were all bright. The more it was like this, the less likely it was to arouse suspicion. There were thousands of cars running on the roads in the capital every day. As long as it was not a special occasion, they would not open the car door for inspection. Moreover, the van looked very ordinary on the surface, which was very suitable for an outsider entering the capital. The advantage of such a van was that nothing could be seen from the outside, but it was very clear from the inside. Someone else was driving. As he turned the wheel of the car, he handed over more than a dozen train tickets to the 2 groups of fake couples. He spoke with an accent, "Get ready. As usual, all of you will sit together." As he spoke, he glanced into the rearview mirror and immediately frowned. He slammed on the brakes and said, "Why is there another child? I won't be at ease if I don't catch him." This child saw our action. If the police ask later, it's very likely that he will become a source of trouble. Anyway, it doesn't matter if we catch 1 or 2. The child of the family selling sesame seed cakes is easier to control. It doesn't matter if we send him away later. Let's sell these 2 goods first. As the man spoke, he covered Bailey Shangxia's nose with his handkerchief again. When the driver saw this, he knew that there was no turning back, so he simply gave them 2 sets of shabby clothes. Change the leather jackets and white shirts that the 2 brats are wearing. They're too eye-catching. Not only were the clothes eye-catching, but the 2 children were also very handsome. They did not look like the children of ordinary families. The traffickers moved quickly. In a few seconds, they changed Bailey Shangxia and little Qingqian's clothes. However, they still kept their pants. After all, it would not affect anything. Once everything was done, the man placed the 2 little ones in a seat with their heads against each other. This was a common trick used by high-level traffickers. Sometimes, if conditions permitted, it was easier to abduct 2 children than to abduct 1, because the illusion of warmth would allow them to pass unimpeded in the event of an inspection. When these 2 brats closed their eyes, they really looked like a pair of brothers. After entering the van, the woman clearly relaxed. She munched on sunflower seeds and looked behind her as she spoke. The man yawned and didn't care at all. Children don't all look the same, but these 2 are really too good-looking. Remember to cover their faces with collars when we get to the train station later. Let's take a nap now. When we get on the train, We have to brace ourselves to deal with it. The woman knew that what the man said made sense, so she closed her eyes as well. Other than the driver, the rest of the people wanted to take some time to rest. No one noticed that the fingers of the two little fellows beside each other moved. They were clearly awake and had not been drugged. This was especially true for Bailey Shangxia. Not only did the drug not make him fall asleep, but it also made his eyes turn even redder. Of course, little Qingchen noticed the unusual aura on this non-human. She clenched her little hand and grabbed his wrist, meaning that he shouldn't ruin her plan. It was the first time that Bailey Shangxia was grabbed by someone. He opened his eyes and glanced at little Qingchen. He looked very cool. In fact, it was very easy to deal with this group of people. They were just a few stupid humans. At most, he would eat their souls in one bite. However, Bailey Shangxia had never taken a train before. He didn't mind taking a trip to experience the human experience. What's more, he said that he would destroy the other party's nest. Thinking of this, Bailey Shangxia closed his eyes again. He probably felt that this position was good. He, who had never had any communication with his peers, lazily leaned against little Qingchen and fell asleep. This was basically the time when the children would be sleepy, especially little Qingchen, who had sat in the classroom for the entire day, was also sleepy now. He emptied his thumb, put it in his mouth, and fell asleep while biting it. It was said that blood was connected. This principle was not false at all. Even Bailey Shangxia and Helian Qingchen didn't know that when they leaned their heads against each other, their sleeping posture was the same. The night outside the window gradually darkened. It was 7:15 p.m. This was the time when the railway station had the largest flow of people. According to statistics, there were more than 300,000 people who would transfer at this station in Beijing West every day. Among them, there were countless intellectuals, people from all walks of life, and countless migrant workers. The railway station was bustling with activity. There was not a moment of silence. Everyone was checking their tickets and entering the station. Dusty bags were squeezing around. Some people were carrying rolled quilts. This was not like the south of Beijing, where the high-speed rail was used. It was relatively more difficult to control. The security personnel mainly looked at whether the ID card and the ticket could be matched. As long as they met the standards and did not carry any dangerous goods, they would be allowed to pass. It was simply a fantasy to ask them to spare time to check whether the children were unconscious. After all, their work was very tiring. It was already very difficult to sit there and continuously check and check. That was what the human traffickers valued, which was why they chose to board the train here. The train left at 7:30 p.m. This was also the time when the parents would discover that their children were really missing. But so what? They had already brought their children on the train. It had to be said that their plan was perfect. The only mistake was that they abducted the wrong people. The sound of the train rang. Beijing's sky was completely dark. Outside the car dealership not far from Panjiayuan, 5 rough men stood in a row. It's already 7:30 p.m. Why isn't Little Boss back yet? The New Orleans chicken wings I roasted for Little Boss are cold. Could it be that Little Boss is lost? How is that possible? Have you forgotten? Little Boss always has a photographic memory. Only an idiot like you would get lost. Don't be noisy. S is driving to school. He should be back soon. The one who was relatively calm was L, who was holding a dismantled iron pipe. But before S came back, Helian Vivian's BMW Tomahawk appeared. The lines were smooth and beautiful. She braked handsomely. Then, she took off her helmet and raised her eyebrows. What are you all standing here for? The 5 rough men looked at each other and said seriously in unison, "Waiting for Little Boss. Qingchen is not back yet?" Helian Vivian paused and frowned. It was only half an hour's journey from here to the kindergarten. Even if he wanted to take Little Black for a walk, he should be back by now. Chapter 881. Just as Helian Weiwei was thinking about this, the sound of another car braking could be heard. It was the modified Hummer driven out by Suitman S. His expression did not look good. It could even be said to be ugly. This was a strong contrast to his usual gentleness when he was flirting. Even when facing the most powerful enemy, he had never shown such an expression. With a bang, the car door was slammed shut. S didn't even have the time to greet Hellion Vivian. He clenched his fists and threw out a bomb. "Little boss is missing." These 6 simple words instantly changed the relaxed atmosphere in the surroundings. "S, what did you say?" Old A, who didn't smile, was like those outlaws that were often seen in movies. At this moment, the scar on his face had an obvious chill. S rubbed his face. "I went to the kindergarten." The kindergarten teacher didn't know how Little Boss disappeared. At that time, she was dealing with a fight in class. She said that Little Boss beat someone up. She wanted Little Boss and another child to wait in the classroom. She didn't expect Little Boss and that child to disappear, just as she finished chatting with the parents. The security guard also confirmed that Little Boss had indeed left the school, and even talked to a man who looked like a relative. He should have been picked up by the relative. This is fucking bullshit. Other than us, Little Boss doesn't have any relatives. This is simply, it's not missing. Hellion Vivian, who hadn't gotten out of the car, interrupted S. Her eyes turned completely cold. "It's abduction." Abduction? It wasn't just the 5 burly men. Even the young L jumped up and threw the steel pipe in his hand. They were already unhappy that the other party was doing business with children in their territory. Now they even dared to touch Little Boss. Were they looking for death? L was the most direct. Without a word, he took out all his equipment from the garage and said coldly, "Let's go." The calmest person in the group was probably Hellion Vivian, his mother. She looked at the few brothers in front of her, who looked like they were about to kill someone. She wasn't very agitated because she knew that there weren't many people in the world who could hurt Qinshin. However, to dare to kidnap her son, the other party was indeed tired of living. It was one thing for Hellion Vivian not to worry, but it was another thing for her son to be touched. "Old A, call Monkey and tell him to come to the garage immediately." As Hellion Vivian spoke, she dismounted from her battle axe and tossed her helmet aside. Her waist-length chestnut-colored hair fluttered in the wind, and she exuded the aura of a queen. She was beautiful and fierce. Send out a notice. Tell all the organizations that the ghosts have returned. Hearing the last sentence, the 6 men were all shocked. Their eyes were filled with a light that they hadn't seen in a long time. Suitman S's cell phone held almost all the secret and blocked contact information. A small email was sent out. The world's top firearms organization, Spectre, had reappeared. The Southeast Asian side did not know what had happened and immediately contacted the other side. They were afraid that they had offended the mercenary queen. Of course, there were also those who were not afraid of death. After all, 3 years was a very long time. Even if the ghosts were resurrected, they might not be as glorious as before. They did not forget that the reason why the ghosts went into hibernation was because their boss was severely injured. Even now, no one knew whether he was alive or dead. However, more than 90% of the people were still very afraid of them. This was especially so for the big boss of the Aemon sect, which was located closest to Wuxia and was famous for its gambling. He was so shocked that he immediately gave us a call. His lips trembled as he held a cigar in his mouth. I am. Suitman had now resumed his attitude towards outsiders and was very professional. The big boss immediately stated, "I only deal in casinos now." What he meant was, "Don't mess with me. I don't touch firearms, and I didn't offend you." Hellion Vivian saw the call and raised her eyebrows. "Who is it?" Of course, the big boss on the other side heard the voice, and his scalp immediately went numb. He did not forget the scene when the other party almost took his life back then. Suitman smiled and said to Hellion Vivian beside him, "It's Uncle Gua. Pass the phone to me." Hellion Vivian did not beat around the bush. Hearing this, the big boss's skin tensed up, and he quietly waited for the voice on the other side of the phone. "Uncle Gua." Hellion Vivian curved her thin lips, and her eyes were shining. "Do you want to do a business deal?" The big boss paused, as if he did not expect Hellion Vivian to say this. "Business? What kind of business?" "I'm currently investigating a child trafficking case. It should be an international case, exported from the mainland to the outside world. As for where the child is sold to, I'm not sure yet. You can tell all the organizations now that I want to completely eliminate this trafficking gang. Those who are willing to cooperate with me will naturally be rewarded. Helene Vivian had always been like this. Using all the resources available was her style. Different from the ancient times, this was the modern era, her territory. The group of human traffickers would never have thought that they would become the wanted targets of all the organizations just because of a child. If it was to avoid the people of the legal world, they had the experience and the means. It could even be said that it was easy. However, if the enemy was also a criminal organization, they would definitely face unexpected consequences. After hanging up the phone, the information network was fully activated. Monkey carried his laptop and quickly rushed to the car dealership. Helene Vivian analyzed in her mind. After a skilled human trafficker abducts a child, they will quickly take the train and leave the original city. For such a large-scale and planned human trafficker, they will definitely prepare the tickets in advance. There will be people in charge of receiving the child and people in charge of the abduction. They will not go to the south of Beijing. The security in the south of Beijing is too tight, and there are too few cars in the north of Beijing. Monkey, check the ordinary trains that leave between 6:30 p.m. and 8 p.m. in the west of Beijing. Yes, the speed of the invasion this time was relatively slower. After all, this was not the school network but the train system. However, this was not a problem for Monkey. The laptop was connected to the big screen, and countless sports cars started faintly in the garage. They were waiting for the answer before setting off together. The image would be transmitted in the form of a video to the navigation system of every sports car. This meant that now, except for Helene Vivian, everyone could see the results of the investigation. Monkey's eyes were fixed on the characters on the computer screen. His fingertips moved quickly, as if he was avoiding some kind of tracking. Boss, I got it. However, we only have 15 minutes. Once the 15 minutes are up, I have to erase the traces of the access. Chapter 882. 15 minutes is enough. Helene Vivian supported herself with her left hand and straddled the sofa with her long legs. She looked at the computer and said into the Bluetooth headset in her left ear, "SL, you guys are in charge of positioning. Gold all day, you guys are in charge of screening." Human traffickers like to send a man and a woman together and pretend to be husband and wife. Some of them even have special means to deal with it. Pay more attention to the couples who don't have a package, but are dressed like a country bumpkin. Yes, the expressions on their faces couldn't be ignored as they entered work mode. Helene Vivian's hand quickly scrolled down. It was difficult for the police to conduct strict checks on the suspects on the train. If they were able to get away with it, it would be difficult to catch the scum on the road. Now that the transportation was so convenient, wouldn't it be easy to change the route? Change. Helene Vivian seemed to have caught on to something important. Her eyes flashed. Monkey, use another computer to check who changed trains more than 3 times in the past 2 days. Roger. The crisp sound of tapping on the keyboard echoed in the empty garage. In just 15 minutes, there were too many scenes to count. Even if certain conditions were eliminated, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack to find someone. Most importantly, based on the traces of the kindergarten's camera being erased, there should be a veteran among the suspects who would notice the surveillance. Helene Vivian frowned and held the laser pointer to freeze the images one by one on the screen. In the end, she found 19 couples that met the criteria. Boss, time is almost up. Monkey was constantly paying attention to the attacks on the screen and was ready to retreat as soon as the time was up. Helene Vivian circled the last image with the laser pointer and said resolutely, "Retreat." Another series of typing sounds rang out. Regardless of whether it was Monkey or the others, all of them quickly erased all traces, not leaving anything that could be traced. On this day, no one knew what had happened. The train system announced to the public that it was under maintenance and that the network was suspended. By the time they discovered the problem, the other party had already retreated. On the other hand, the netizens who bought tickets frowned. They felt that the train system had been hacked. This system generally had its own rules. It would only be repaired after 11 p.m. It was not even 8 p.m. yet, which was the time when people urgently booked tickets. Why would the system be repaired? Soon, a technical analysis post appeared on Jihu. The analysis post was anonymous, but one could not tell that the person was very knowledgeable about computers. According to his analysis, the train network system was definitely hacked by a high-level organization. According to him, no one was aware of it, and even the management of the train network system still didn't know why the other party had hacked into the system. He had also tried to track them down, but the IP addresses were from several different internet cafes. This was something that only the best of the best could do. After the technical analysis was posted, an announcement was made on the train network system. It said that the scalpers had tried to engage in illegal activities, but they had been found out and stopped. Once the announcement was made, the technical analysis post was also banned. Some people who didn't understand really believed it, but the smart hackers smelled the hidden message. Someone was definitely doing something. Monkey, how is it? Did any of the 19 couples change stations midway? Helly and Vivian asked this because human traffickers would not choose to travel on long-distance trains. This was because it was very likely that they would face sudden interrogations, and even children would wake up. Generally speaking, the more skilled a human trafficker was, the more likely they were to change stations midway. This was to make it easier to control the goods. As long as the goods were under control, everything would be fine. There are 5 couples. Monkey pressed the space bar, and the identities and train numbers of those people were immediately displayed. Helly and Vivian looked at the pictures, and the corners of her mouth curled up sinisterly. She put on the Bluetooth earpiece and said, "You've received the pictures, right? Remember their information and train numbers. Now we'll start to locate them and chase after them separately." As soon as she finished speaking, the garage of the shabby car shop opened completely. 6 limited edition sports cars rushed out almost at the same time. Each of them had beautiful performance curves. This made the beauties who came to repair the cars open their mouths wide. They watched the 6 sports cars set off together. Such a cool scene made them want to scream. Most importantly, they always came here to get their cars repaired. So they were very clear about the situation of this car repair shop. It was just a group of ordinary people, and there were even prisoners working there. Although the economic situation was not bad, they were not that rich. Furthermore, the exterior was old and shabby. How could there be so many luxury cars hidden? Helly and Vivian ignored the reaction outside and reached out to take her helmet. She looked back and asked, "Monkey, did you find the car I asked you to find?" "I found it, but..." Monkey paused and continued, "The owner of that car is very mysterious. I followed the clues and dug deeper. But one thing is clear. The Lamborghini went to send someone to school that day. I went to the kindergarten and asked. A teacher saw it and said that the child was also in the first class and was in the same class as Little Boss. There's one thing I didn't care about before, but I have to say it now. Boss, that child disappeared with Little Boss." Helly and Vivian stopped in surprise and raised her eyebrows. What happened? The 2 of them were abducted together? It seems to be the case. Monkey touched the bridge of his nose. But that child's parents seem to be calmer than you, boss. They didn't go to the school to look for their son. Helly and Vivian touched her chin with her slender fingers. This time, the traffickers abducted children from ordinary families. They even specifically targeted children who were slightly poor. Chingchen should have been mistaken for a poor student. But the child driving the Lamborghini was also abducted? This is not normal. The traffickers probably had no choice but to take him away. Wait a minute. Monkey angrily interrupted Helly and Vivian. Boss, are you saying that Little Boss was abducted because the traffickers thought that Little Boss was poor? Little Boss was poor? Damn it. He was going to donate a teaching building to the kindergarten in Little Boss's name. Chapter 883. Helly and Vivian coughed softly. Why are you so agitated? I can't tolerate the fact that Little Boss is poor. Monkey stood up with a bang. Hellion Vivian comforted him. All right, let's talk about it after we find him. Soon, those people will know that kidnapping Qingchen is the biggest mistake they have made in their lives. We must destroy them. Monkey was still angry. Hellion Vivian thought for a while. Even if we can't find the owner of the Lamborghini, we should be able to spread the news and tell him again that his son has been kidnapped. Okay. Monkey calmed down a little, thinking that the owner of the car was definitely not an ordinary person. If he joined them, they would be able to find them faster. After that, Hellion Vivian didn't say anything else. She put on her helmet, crossed her long legs over the battle axe, and rushed out of the car. 5 minutes later, in a luxurious villa buried deep in the capital, roses covered the entire wall, as if no sunlight could penetrate it. A tall and straight man was sitting in front of the large floor-to-ceiling glass window. His slender legs were crossed, and his head was lowered as he listened to the report of the people below. He supported his chin lazily with one hand, looking completely indifferent. The silver-white hair on his forehead fell down and blocked his eyes, making it difficult to see his appearance clearly. All he could see was the smooth curve of her chin. However, with him as the center, there was an ethereal black fog behind him. There seemed to be something hidden in the black fog that could surge out at any time. Mr. Bailey, this is the news I received. Little young Master Shangxia has been kidnapped. The middle-aged man knelt on the ground, his teeth chattering as he said, We will inform the people in the school to look for him, and see if anyone knows where he went. Upon hearing this, Bailey Jiaju glanced sideways at her. His eyes were long and narrow, slightly slanted upward, exuding a faint sharpness. His skin was pale white, and from afar, there was a kind of morbid coquettishness. It made him look like a vampire aristocrat who lived in the 19th century, arrogant and indifferent. I will look for her myself. How is the matter that I asked you to investigate? The expression of the man who was swept by him changed. An unconcealable fear leaked out from his swaying pupils. He stuttered as he replied, What Mr. Bailey is looking for, I'm still investigating. However, in China, it can't be compared to in the West. Some methods can't be used. I still need a bit of time to determine whether or not that Miss Hellion is in the capital. 3 days. Baligija looked at him coldly. Director Zhang, I will only give you 3 days. 3 days. Director Zhang wiped his cold sweat. Isn't this a little too rushed? Baligija laughed, his voice. You think it's too short? This is the longest time I will give you to live. As soon as his voice fell, the black fog behind him surged for a while. It seemed like there were countless demons hiding in it, and each of their eyes were as red as blood. Director Zhang immediately felt his throat choked, and he didn't have the courage to refute. He said hurriedly, Sir, don't worry, I will definitely find her. I will use all my power now to continue the search. Only then was Bailey Jiaju satisfied. He asked the shadow behind him to make way for Director Zhang. Director Zhang saw this and didn't dare to stay at all. He ran out of the villa in 2 steps, scared out of his wits. Outside the villa, little Fatty Cheng's father, Chung Longquan, was waiting for his uncle and boss. Seeing his uncle like this, he couldn't help but open the car door and muttered, It's better not to come this time. The Zhang family has power and influence in the capital. Why should we be afraid of a rich businessman who came from nowhere? Shut up. Director Zhang was afraid that someone would hear him, so he looked around and breathed a sigh of relief. Don't say anything bad about Mr. Bailey in the future. He is not just a rich businessman. Remember, this person not only controls the lifeline of the Zhang family, but also can buy all the properties of other families. I met him in the UK. If I'm not wrong, he should have the blood of the British royal family. Chung Longquan didn't believe it. I've also seen Mr. Bailey. Although I didn't see him clearly from a distance, his hair is silver gray, but his facial features are Asian, aren't they? How can he have the blood of the British royal family? You don't understand at all. The older the royal family is, the more Asian blood will be mixed with it. Director Zhang pinched his tired eyebrows. These are not important. What's important is your attitude. Don't be disrespectful to Mr. Bailey anymore. Otherwise, you will kill our whole family. Seeing that his uncle was so serious, Chung Longquan was a little afraid in his heart. He didn't speak again, turned the steering wheel, and left this seemingly unfathomable villa. Baligaju stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, shaking the goblet filled with red liquid with his fingertips, and looked away with a mocking expression. Master! A cloud of black fog gushed out from the depths of the villa, and then slowly turned into a human shape. The aura of the little master seems to be covered by something. I can't find it no matter how I search. Baligaju was much more relieved about a certain little ghost. He looked up at the clock hanging on the wall. Soon, he will be hungry. What do you think will happen to the people who abducted him? The black shadow lowered his eyes. To be honest, he really didn't dare to think about that. The train set off from the west of Beijing, and would reach the first stop in 10 minutes. This stop was a small city. The good thing was that it was located in Beijing, Tianjin, and Hebei, and the traffic was developed. In addition, the security checks in small cities were more lax. Therefore, the human traffickers had already discussed that they would get off at this stop, and then act separately. There were always many people on ordinary trains. Sometimes, there would even be luggage piled up in the passage, and some people would play poker on the train. At this time, basically no one would be sleeping. The human traffickers still let the two little people sit in the same seat, the innermost seat. Behind them was a female university student. The female university student seemed to like children very much. In addition, Bailey Shangxia and Helian Qingchen's appearance was too eye-catching, and people couldn't help but look back when they saw them. However, there was one thing that made her feel very regretful. The two little people fell asleep as soon as they got on the train, and until now, they hadn't woken up. She wanted to tease them with delicious food, but she couldn't do it. At this time, the human traffickers were also hungry. Only one person was left to watch over them. The others went to the toilet and prepared to get off the train. Originally, everything was going smoothly, including when they got off the train and checked in. However, it was different outside the station. This difference was all because Bailey Shangxia had woken up. Chapter 884. Darkness was approaching, and the Devil's Carnival was about to begin. The human traffickers did not know how dangerous the child was with them. Now they only wanted to find a small hotel that did not require identification, order takeout, have a good meal, rest, feed the two goods some medicine, and then split up. However, they did not expect that as soon as they entered the room, the woman who was holding Bailey Shangxia suddenly seemed to be possessed. Her face was covered with a black fog, and it seemed to be sinking into her body inch by inch. The soul-wrenching pain caused the woman to throw Bailey Shangxia out of her hand. She stared at the child without blinking, as if she wanted to say something, but it was too late. The black fog had invaded her eyes and completely sucked away all of her life force. There was no sign of her death. In the next second, she was lying on the ground. Bailey Shangxia was standing right in front of her. As he had just woken up, his short black hair was still standing up straight. His expression was very cool. He licked his thin lips cruelly and bloodthirstily. Then he sneered, as if he was disgusted by the taste of something. The woman's painful cry attracted everyone's attention, and the human traffickers did not notice the strangeness of Bailey Shangxia at all. Little Qingchen, on the other hand, was awakened by the commotion. He reached out his little hand and rubbed his big eyes. Then, he turned his head and looked at Bailey Shangxia, who was also a child. His little eyebrows furrowed. He finally knew what the other party was, a demon that fed on souls. However, she had never seen a devil of the same age as her. Under normal circumstances, devils would not appear. They were like the bloodlings, and after so many years of settling, they had perfectly infiltrated into the lives of humans. It could even be said that they were more extravagant than humans, because most of them were nobles from various countries. The more elegant they were, the more it suited their temperament. It was said that the only thing a devil pursued in life was aesthetics. They would even eat with a smile on their face, and no one would feel that they were rude. Bailey Shangxia in front of her was the same, which made little Qingchen feel very strange when she saw him. She wanted to take him home and raise him, But she did not know if Beauty Wei Wei would agree to let him keep a little devil by his side. She should, right? Little Qingchen rubbed her little face again. Her actions were like a little squirrel, always a little dazed after waking up. She blinked her big eyes a few times before she reacted. Now was not the time to consider the problem of raising a devil, but to stop this non-human devil from continuing. She stretched out her little hand and held Bailey Shangxia's wrist. Her little head shook twice, and her expression was very cute. Bailey Shangxia was not full yet, but when he saw that his underling had woken up, he took the time to show some concern. Where did you buy that piece of chocolate cake that you ate? It would have been fine if the other party did not mention the chocolate cake, but when he mentioned Qingchen, he was even more determined to not let this group of human traffickers die. However, this did not affect his conversation with the little devil, who looked only a little older than him. I didn't buy the chocolate cake, my mother made it for me. Oh, Bailey Shangxia had been in the modern world for a while, but he had never wanted to find his mother as much as he did now. Especially when he heard that the chocolate cake was made by his mother, this feeling became even stronger, to the point that the little devil looked a little lonely. Of course, Bailey Shangxia's way of expressing his loneliness was very different. He raised his eyelids, squinted his big red eyes, and walked directly to another man, looking like he was about to start the next round of eating. Little Qingchen quickly blocked in front of him, and whispered in his ear with a small voice, looking very cute. We have to keep them alive, so that we can eliminate their leader. With little Qingchen's reminder, Bailey Shangxia remembered that half of the chocolate cake that he did not get. His eyes were full of hostility, and his voice was very cool. Got it. Indeed, he had to keep them alive, but this one would not be kept alive for long. Under such circumstances, the human traffickers did not have the extra energy to care about what the two little people were talking about. They were now scared out of their wits. The scene just now seemed to have exceeded their understanding of things. The big man trembled as he stretched out his hand, wanting to check if the woman on the ground was still breathing. The other woman immediately pulled his hand back. Don't touch. It's not clean. There must be something dirty in this small hotel. It must be so. She spoke with a hoarse voice. If she was not scared to a certain extent, she would not be like this. The man in the blue shirt also had cold sweat on his forehead, but it was obvious that he was different from the other two traffickers, and had received professional training. He roared in a low voice, "Calm down." There was already someone knocking on the wall next door, probably because they thought that they were too noisy. In the past, when doing missions, such a situation had never happened. If someone suddenly died in the middle of a mission, it would be a serious problem for their work. The man thought, and reached out to massage his forehead, as if he had a headache. The woman was still trembling. She could not wait to leave this place. She thought that there was an evil spirit in the small hotel, and did not think about the two little people. However, the man's eyes were on Bailey Shangxia and Helian Qingchen, and there was a questioning look in his eyes. Why are these two little brats so obedient? During this period of time, he had abducted many children, and every child would cry desperately after waking up for the first time. There was never a moment of silence. At this time, the children were most likely to be exposed and arouse suspicion, so they chose to come to the small hotel at this time to rest instead of sitting on the train. When they were tired from crying for a while, they would be hungry and tired, and would not make a fuss anymore. This was the usual method of the traffickers. He had already prepared a cotton cloth to gag the two little brats. After all, the scene in the kindergarten made him feel a little uncomfortable. Unexpectedly, they were the quietest. Looking carefully, their little faces were a little pale, and he did not know why. They must be scared. The woman mumbled, her voice trembling. Children are psychic, they can see dirty things that others can't. This hotel is definitely problematic. At this time the man sneered. So what if there are dirty things? Don't forget who is behind us. I have already told you, this is a big deal, and it is done by the master. What are you afraid of? It's just a little evil. Everything will be fine when you see the master. It's good if there are dirty things. It can make these two little brats quiet. The woman did not expect that her colleague would be so bold. She opened her mouth and wanted to say something. The man waved his hand and said, "Okay, you don't have to shout anymore. Drag the person on the ground to hide under the bed. Get ready, we will leave. There are still 4 hours before checkout. 4 hours later, someone will come and knock on the door. This small hotel will not find anything for the time being. We can't continue to stay here. According to the original plan, you and Xiao Wang will go in one line, and I will go in one line. We will send these two goods separately." When Bailey Shangxia heard that the other party wanted to separate him and his underling, his red eyes were filled with a cold light. It should be known that the current little Qingchen was countless pieces of chocolate cake to Bailey Shangxia. It was fine that the other party had knocked away half of the chocolate cake, but now they dared to take away all the chocolate cake that he was going to eat in the future. Bailey Shangxia sneered in his heart. The light above his head seemed to have sensed something, and it made a buzzing sound. The woman and the burly man were already very scared. Now that they saw the situation in the room, they widened their eyes in horror. However, before they could scream, the entire room was plunged into darkness. In just a moment, the woman only felt a cold wind flash past her. It was so dark in front of her that she could not even see her fingers. She fell to the ground at once, and her voice was filled with fear. "It's haunted, it's really haunted." "What do you mean by haunted?" It tripped. The man in the blue shirt reacted quickly. He picked up the phone and shone it to the side, and then pushed the door open. The light in the room was finally restored. The woman secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Just as she was about to stand up, she found that the burly man beside her was lying on the ground stiffly. He looked exactly like the woman who was tricked when they entered the room. The woman could no longer hold back the fear in her heart. She reached out and grabbed the man's sleeve. "We can't stay here. We really can't stay here anymore. We'll take the 2 children and leave immediately. Anyway, we're going to the same place, so we might as well take the same train. No matter what, we have to leave here. If you don't leave now, I'll leave by myself." "What are you panicking for?" Even though the man said that, his back was drenched in sweat. This small hotel was indeed abnormal, and they had to disguise themselves as a couple to avoid any mistakes. The other party was not very experienced in abduction, so it was best for them to leave together. With that in mind, he pushed the big man under the bed as well, and his voice became anxious. "We'll take the same train. You carry one child, and I'll carry the other. Let's go immediately." Of course, the woman couldn't wait to check out. She didn't even say anything, and bent down to pick up little Qingchen. Little Qingchen was very cooperative. She looked sideways at Bailey Shangxia, who was also picked up by the man, and the desire to raise a little devil became stronger. Her little hand involuntarily reached out and touched Bailey Shangxia's head. Chapter 885. Bailey Shangxia's short hair was very stiff and hard to the touch. He had never had his head touched before. He looked up at little Qingchen and licked his thin lips with the tip of his tongue, as if he had just eaten something. However, this bit of food was not enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. However, he was not in a hurry to kill everyone. Compared to killing people directly, demons like to see the fear of humans on the verge of collapse the most before they died. Just like now, Bailey Shangxia looked at the woman's trembling back and felt very amused. However, he was still very hungry. The woman felt a chill on her back. She turned around and looked behind her, but did not find anything. The man in the blue shirt was making a call. The person on the other end seemed to have been transferred to the person he was looking for. When the man heard that the call was connected, he immediately lowered his voice and said hurriedly, "Master, we seem to have encountered something dirty. 2 people died inexplicably." "Dirty?" The person on the other end narrowed his eyes and did not seem to care. "We'll talk about it when you come back. What about the goods? Are they okay?" The man seemed to be very respectful to this master, and replied respectfully, "The goods are fine. I'm just afraid that the hotel will find out something when the time comes. It's just a small hotel. If the bodies are hidden well, they won't be found for 10 days or half a month. Don't worry, there are no surveillance cameras in the small hotel, and there is no identity registration. Even if people die, it won't be blamed on you. The most important thing is to keep the goods safe and send them back quickly. If you encounter any strange things, just stick the yellow talisman I gave you. It will suppress the soul and exorcise the evil." When the man heard this, his eyes lit up. He hung up the phone and asked the woman to take out the yellow talisman from his backpack. Seeing that the yellow talisman was protecting him, the woman's hand that was holding little Qingchen relaxed a lot. She smiled. With the master's yellow talisman, any evil spirit will only walk into the trap. Little Qingchen glanced at the yellow talisman and silently stroked Bailey Shangxia's head. Bailey Shangxia's direction was not very good. He stopped little Qingchen's actions and maintained a cool expression throughout the whole process. In his heart, he was thinking that if he touched her, he would ask her to compensate him with a piece of chocolate cake. Anyway, he would not let anyone touch him for nothing. There weren't that many people at the train station at night. In addition, this was a small city, so there were relatively fewer people entering the station. The two human traffickers had been so busy that they had not eaten anything. Furthermore, someone had died in the small hotel. Even if they were inhumane, they would not be in a good mood. Their entire body was indescribably weak, and they only wanted to drink some hot soup to warm their bodies. Therefore, the woman stayed behind to monitor the two little ones. The man took out his wallet and planned to buy 2 bowls of instant noodles and eat them with hot water. They had changed the train schedule at the last minute. Although there were no more seats, the train would depart 3 hours earlier than the previous one. There was still half an hour before it would depart. They could take advantage of this time to rest in the waiting hall. The woman was really mentally exhausted. If it were not for the yellow talisman, she would probably have broken down. The place that sold instant noodles was in the waiting hall, but the place where they needed to get hot water was a little far away. The man asked the woman to feed the 2 little ones some medicine. He did not have to let them fall asleep. It was good that they were listless like now. The woman responded with her mouth, but her hands did not move for a long time. Looking at the back of the man's departing figure, she reached out and rubbed her face. They had abducted and sold so many children, but none of them had been as embarrassed as they were today. Speaking of which, this woman had not received much education. In fact, she also had children. However, blinded by greed, she only had her own children in her eyes. She knew that abductors could make money quickly. She had done all kinds of heartless things and had never felt guilty. As long as she could live a good life, she did not care what others did. She had been interrogated by the police before. But so what? The police were very efficient. The abductors were very familiar with the police's efficiency. They insisted that they did not do it, and everything was peaceful. She did not think that she was guilty, nor did she think that the dirty things in the hotel were retribution for them. She just felt that they were unlucky to have entered a small hotel that they should not have entered. Moreover, these 2 little ones, one of them had red eyes. It was not easy to make a move on them. The woman had a fickle temper. Coupled with her experience, when she looked at little Qingchen and Bailey Shangxia, it was inevitable that her expression would be a little ugly. Some human traffickers would often secretly vent their anger on the children after abducting them. This woman was such a human trafficker. She reached out her hand and wanted to slap little Qingchen. Anyway, when the child cried, people would only think that she was disciplining the child for being disobedient. The 2 little ones were leaning their heads against each other, curiously looking at the scene in the train station. Qingchen's stomach was also hungry and was growling. She did not expect that the woman would make a move. However, before her palm could land on her back, her entire body was pulled over by a small wrist. That small finger was as white and beautiful as his father's. "I wanted to play with you more, but you humans are so stupid. Not only do you have a death wish, but you also want to touch my chocolate cake time and time again." Qingchen, who was treated like a chocolate cake, was speechless. "Anyway, if you die, someone else will take us there." Thinking of this, Bailey Shangxia did not need to hide anymore. His eyes emitted a unique light that was unique to demons. The woman stared at this scene with her eyes wide open. Her heart surged with unprecedented regret. She wanted to scream, but she found that her throat seemed to be blocked by something. She could not make a sound. She had always thought that the dirty things were in the hotel. She never thought that there would be any problem with the child they abducted. When she saw the bloodthirsty evil smile on that handsome little face, her scalp went numb. What kind of thing did they abduct? The woman did not have time to move. She could not even shake off that porcelain white hand. She was engulfed by a black fog from head to toe. That kind of pain was almost imprinted on her soul. She opened her mouth, and the next moment, she sat back in her seat. Her neck stiffly drooped, as if she had fallen asleep. However, little Qingchen knew that she was not asleep. Her soul was eaten by Bailey Shangxia. Speaking of which, he seemed to have a big appetite. Little Qingchen turned her head to look at Bailey Shangxia. Bailey Shangxia licked his thin lips and said in a cool voice, "What are you looking at? Eating too much is not good for digestion," little Qingchen said as she rubbed her little belly. She looked up at Bailey Shangxia and said, "I'm hungry too." Little Bailey Shangxia had no experience in taking care of humans. With a cool expression, he jumped down from the seat and opened the small bag that the woman carried with her. He took out all the cash that he could use and said in a domineering manner, "I'll buy you some food when we get on the train." "Okay." Qingchen nodded. She thought for a moment and added, "I'm not chocolate cake." Bailey Shangxia refuted seriously, "You are. Others are ham, but you are chocolate cake. I can smell milk on you. Don't underestimate the demon's sense of smell." Qingchen. "Beauty Wei Wei. The little demon is a big foodie. What should I do?" Bailey Shangxia's small figure stood there, stuffing all the money in his hands into the pockets of little Qingchen, who was sitting on the chair. From afar, he looked like a little brother with his cool and arrogant demeanor. When little Qingchen saw that he had given all the money to her, she lowered her head and patted her little pocket. She said, "If you want to treat me to chocolate cake, I'll ask Beauty Wei Wei to make it for you when we get back." After all, if he wanted to raise a little demon, he had to find a way to abduct her to his home. Bailey Shangxia did not refuse. He nodded and carried Qingchen, who was half a head shorter than him, up from the seat and moved her to another position. He was only that big, so he looked clumsy when he carried a little Qingchen who was about the same size as him. No matter how strong he was, he looked clumsy. However, the people waiting for the train not far away felt that this scene was very cute. In addition, the two children were very good-looking, so it was naturally eye-catching. They're brothers, right? Nonsense, of course they're brothers. The older brother is so handsome. His nose is straight, and his skin is so white that it looks like it's painted. And his eyes are big and bright. He's a foreigner, right? His eyes are dark red. He's probably a mixed race. Look at his black hair. A mixed race is more handsome. When the man came back with the bowl of instant noodles, he heard these words. He narrowed his eyes and hurriedly walked through the crowd. When he saw that the two children were not shouting or crying, and that the woman was sitting opposite them, he breathed a sigh of relief. But why did the woman dare to sleep at this time? The man was displeased. He touched the woman's head with one of the bowls of instant noodles and said in a low voice, "What's going on? Wake up." The woman did not move at all. Not only that, but she also fell to the side when the man touched her. Fortunately, her friend was sitting next to her. Otherwise, he would definitely have noticed the woman's suspicion. The man was the closest to his companion. When he saw the woman's abnormal expression, he immediately understood what had happened. The answer was coming. He tried his best to control his emotions so that he would not throw the bowl of instant noodles in his hand away. This was because he knew that if he made a loud noise now, it would definitely attract attention. Therefore, he had to endure it. He first put the bowl of instant noodles aside, then stretched out his trembling right hand to help the woman back to her original position. That way, it would look like she was just asleep and not breathing. After doing all this, the man turned around to look at Bailey Shangxia and the others. He planned to feed the rest of the medicine to the two children. Then, no matter who he carried, he would get on the train first. However, when he bent down, he saw a small bag under the feet of the two children. This bag was clearly carried by the woman. How did it get under their feet? Chapter 886. Suddenly, the way the man looked at Bailey Shangxia and Helian Qingchen completely changed. He felt strange from the beginning, and that strange feeling was indescribable. These two little brats were too quiet, and they had not cried from the beginning to the end. Even when they were in kindergarten, one of them even brought him to see the police. If he had not reacted fast enough, he would have been caught by now. How could a 3-year-old child be so smart? When he was 3 years old, if someone gave him a piece of candy, he would probably follow that person. Would he know how to set a trap for others? This was simply a fantasy story. Originally, everything was going smoothly today, but ever since they met these two brats, more and more trouble began to appear. 3 people, a total of 3 people had already died. But these two brats did not even make a fuss. People died for no reason. Were they not afraid? Even if they were not afraid, which child would be in the mood to take the money in the bag at this time? Strange, all of this was too strange. For some reason, the man felt that the 2 children in front of him made him feel very oppressed, especially the child they did not want to kidnap. That pair of fiery red eyes was just like a demon. That's right. It was the kind of evil, elegant, and murderous demon that walked out of asshole. The man trembled. Whether it was his illusion or not, he did not want to do this business anymore. Without hesitation, the man took the wallet in his hand and turned to leave. It just so happened that the train he was going to take had started to check in. Even if he walked very quickly, it would not be strange. Moreover, as long as it was a train station, there would never be a lack of people checking in, no matter how small the city was. Bailey Shangxia looked at the back of the man, who blended into the crowd in the blink of an eye. His small brows furrowed, and then he laughed coldly. Want to escape? Ha! No human could escape from the palm of his hand. What's more, he still had to follow this little white mouse to find the person behind it. He had promised that he would finish everything in one fell swoop. Little Qingchen had the same idea, so before Bailey Shangxia could say anything, he jumped down from his seat. He was still a little shaky when he walked, but he didn't forget to hold Bailey Shangxia's hand. He took small steps forward and said in a serious tone, "I know which train he's taking. We'll get on with him." Little Qingchen had a photographic memory since he was young. When the human traffickers were holding the train tickets, he had already scanned the information on them. Not only did he remember the train schedule, he even remembered the carriage and seat number of the human traffickers. It was just a little troublesome to go through the security check. Little Qingchen raised her head and tried to jump up, but she couldn't see anything in front of her. When Bailey Shangxia saw that he was struggling to jump, he immediately reached out and carried the little one up. However, it was useless. The two of them added together were not even as tall as a high school student. It seems that I can only freeload. Little Qingchen finished talking to himself and continued to hold Bailey Shangxia's hand. Like leading his little child, they stood in front of the 2 couples. The couple had already noticed them. Just now, they saw the older brother carrying the younger brother, and even put the younger brother on the seat, asking him to sit properly. It was so cute. Now that the 2 little ones were standing in front of them, they couldn't help but stroke the head of the younger one. Little Qingchen knew that his plan had succeeded. He raised his head and smiled at the girl who was stroking his head. Just like that, they entered the station together with the crowd. No one would check the 2 children's tickets. Everyone thought that they were brought in by the adults behind them. After all, their height was not enough to buy a half-price ticket, especially one of them, who was running unsteadily and kept swaying back and forth. Bailey Shangxia was afraid that he would run too fast and fall, so he lowered his head and held him down. He lowered his eyes and rolled up little Qingchen's long sleeves. So loving. This is the most loving brother I have ever seen. He even rolled up his sleeves. I wonder if he knows how to tie the baby's shoelaces? It's so cute. Little Qingchen didn't think much of it. When Bailey Shangxia asked him to lift his left hand, he lifted his left hand. When he asked him to lift his right hand, he lifted his right hand. Her big round eyes were looking at the train. No one knew what she was looking at. Her hair was messy, and a few strands of her ahogue were looking at her from the top of her head. She looked very fluffy, and she looked very obedient. After he finished rolling up his sleeves, he stretched out his left hand and poked the palm of his right hand. The onlookers couldn't help but want to hold him in their arms and give him a good rub. After that, little Qingqian's actions didn't seem so clumsy. However, Bailey Shangxia still planned to hold his hand. "Give me your hand, we'll walk hand in hand. Don't worry, the train won't leave." With him around, the train would only leave when he wanted it to. Little Qingqian was also obedient. He passed his hand over to her, and the two little ones held each other's hands again. They walked forward one small step at a time. Everything was fine at first. When they entered the carriage, Bailey Shangxia couldn't walk anymore. He looked at the countless people in front of him and licked the tip of his tongue. "There's so much food." Little Qingqian was speechless. "You can't eat. I'll buy you a bento box later." It's shown on TV that there are bento boxes on the train. Little Qingqian sternly stopped Bailey Shangxia. It was also his first time taking a train. Usually he would take a plane, so he had never had such an experience. However, standing in the middle of a group of food, he had to be patient. Bailey Shangxia looked to the left, and then to the right. He was very restless. "When I ate people just now, you didn't say anything. That's different. That's a human trafficker. You can eat as much as you want." Bailey Shangxia stood there and didn't leave. Little Qingqian could only pull him hard. Bailey Shangxia was very puzzled. "They're all ham sausages. What's the difference? Only you would treat humans as ham sausages." Little Qingqian was very helpless. "The people here are all ordinary people. You can't hurt them." "Why?" His father didn't tell him what he couldn't eat. Oh right, he couldn't eat dirty things. This was the standard etiquette of the demons. However, the people he saw just now were very fresh and didn't smell bad. Why couldn't he eat them? Because they didn't do anything wrong. If you kill them, it's equivalent to committing a crime. When the time comes, little Qingqian suddenly paused. Like a little adult, he held his forehead and said, "Why should I argue with you about this?" This non-human guy obviously didn't have a sense of good and evil. In his eyes, there was no difference between human traffickers and ordinary people. They were all ham sausages. The only difference was the brand. "I'm hungry." Bailey Shangxia was very cool. He only gave little Qingqian 3 words. He narrowed his eyes in dissatisfaction and planned to attack the nearest human. Little Qingqian immediately pulled him back and ran to the front of the train attendant who was selling snacks. He raised his small face and said in a childish voice, "Sister, do you have chocolate? I want to buy a piece." It was rare for such a young child to buy things by himself. The train attendant was stunned at first, then smiled and said, "Oh, we do. It's for Dove. 1 piece is 10 yuan. I want 2 yuan. Little Qingqian rummaged through his pocket and fished out a 50 yuan note. He then handed it over with his small hand. Bailey Shangxia had already lost interest in the ham sausages that could be eaten at any time after hearing about the chocolate. He looked at the chocolate in little Qingqian's hand with bright eyes. Little Qingqian wasn't very good at opening the packaging of jades. He held the money in his small hand, and after a long time, he still couldn't open the packaging. Bailey Shangxia found an empty seat and carried little Qingqian to sit on it. Then he opened the 2 pieces of chocolate. He took 1 piece and fed the other to little Qingqian. When he was almost halfway through, Bailey Shangxia remembered that human anatomy was different from his. He put away little Qingqian's piece and said seriously, "Children can't eat too much chocolate." When the people around him heard this, they burst out laughing. "This brother is so interesting. He's still a child." Little Qingqian actually still wanted to eat, but he knew that if he continued to eat, his teeth would definitely hurt. He endured the pain and looked at the half piece of chocolate again. Bailey Shangxia opened his mouth and ate the rest of the chocolate. His voice was still cool. "Let's go find that man." "Okay." Little Qingqian patted his small pocket and walked behind Bailey Shangxia shakily. At this time, the train had already left for 10 minutes. The human trafficker didn't expect Bailey Shangxia and little Qingqian to follow him onto the train. He thought that the matter was solved. He leaned against the carriage and rubbed his head. Then he lit a cigarette and took 2 deep puffs. Unlike planes and high-speed trains, smoking was allowed on the express train. In the pantry of the carriage, people often gathered together to smoke. The human trafficker didn't buy a ticket. After so many things happened 3 times in a row, he planned to take the bus directly to Yunggui district after getting off the train this time. Then, he would change to the train that they were going to do the transaction. Without a child, taking the bus was the safest way to avoid detection. It was easy to deal with the hotel, but the woman who died at the waiting station of the train would definitely be found within a day. After this transaction, he would directly leave the border from Yunnan. Otherwise, he couldn't guarantee that he would be in danger. When he thought of this, the human trafficker punched the side of the carriage. Fortunately, he was in the bathroom. He raised his head and looked at himself in the mirror. He washed his face with cold water and dialed a number. Master, another person died. Goods? I didn't bring the goods. I have a feeling that these 2 brats are too strange. They're not normal at all. Yes, I'm on the train now. I'll be there in 3 hours. The other goods are still here. I'll ask someone to bring them to the train when the time comes. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.